Chapter 223. Chu Lushan did not enter Xiangfan City directly. Instead, he boarded the ship and went to the Spring God Lake. In the middle of the night, Chu Lushan, who was sleeping in his room and snoring loudly, slowly woke up. Outside the room, a trusted subordinate who accompanied him out of Beiliang said softly, "General, we have arrived. They are requesting to board the ship." For the first time, Chu Lushan did not put on airs. He said in a low voice, "Go back and tell them that I am going to meet them." When Chu Lushan got up, the sturdy bed creaked. He went to the window and saw a large ship from Qingzhou approaching carefully. There was no flag on it. If he did not receive news that His Royal Highness was assassinated and had no choice but to rush over, he would have met with the ship outside during the day. The person on the boat was a local tyrant in Qingzhou. The reason why the Green faction was able to bully others in the imperial court was because of their ability to act on the whims of the wind and to form an alliance with the aristocratic families through marriage. The person they were about to meet was a roly-poly in the Green faction, one of the few old consecrators. Since Chu Lushan was able to put up a good show, he was naturally very meticulous. However, during the Spring and Autumn Kingdom War, he was completely devoid of conscience and thus covered it up. After tidying up his clothes, Chu Lushan walked out of the room. Because his body size was too rare, the deck that connected the two ships was widened. There were 3 more boards than usual. Presumably, they were afraid that the board would not be able to bear the weight and cause the infamous general of Beiliang, Chen Youwu, to fall into the water. Chu Lushan strode forward. Even though the deck was stacked with 2 layers, it was still bent by his terrifying weight. The elegant middle-aged Confucian scholar opposite him was sweating. When the adopted son of the king of Beiliang boarded the ship, he immediately bowed and said respectfully, "Lu Dongjiang welcomes General Chu. Lu Dongjiang's rank is the same as mine." "It is not appropriate," Chu Lushan said with a smile. Although he was polite, he did not help Lu Dongjiang up. If this scene was seen by the officials of Qingzhou, it would cause a huge commotion. Lu Dongjiang was the governor of Taishi County in Qingzhou. His father was the previous governor of Qingzhou. Most importantly, the ancestor of the Lu family who was still alive was one of the 14 pillars of the dynasty. Together with the other 2 old consecrators, they were the leaders of the Green Party. Lu Dongjiang's family's knowledge was profound. He was especially good at writing big regular script, which was his strength, but it did not lose its charm. Hence, he was called Lu Dongjiang. In the palace examination in the early years, even the late emperor was full of praise after seeing Lu Dongjiang's writing. Lu Dongjiang's grandfather, Lu Feiqi, was an important official of 2 dynasties. He had moved through the 3 ministries of military and civil affairs. He had once formed a cabinet with the old Grand Secretary. His experience and popularity were first class in the Liang dynasty. Even though he retired a few years ago due to health reasons, he was still greatly favored by the emperor and retained the title of Pillar of the State. Last year, this Pillar of the State caught a cold. The current emperor personally sent an imperial envoy to Qingzhou to greet him. It could be said that in Qingzhou, whether it was Lu Dongjiang's talent or his family background, perhaps only the king of Jing'an, Xiaoheng, was worthy of his careful treatment. There was not a single idle person on the ship. Other than Lu Dongjiang, there were only a few elite men of sacrifice who had served the Lu family for generations. Chu Lushan nodded lightly at this arrangement. Lu Dongjiang led the way in front and went straight to the 3rd floor. After opening the door, he did not enter with Chu Lushan. Chu Lushan's body was too fat. When he stepped over the threshold, he stretched slightly and his wide sleeves were pulled. Lu Dongjiang hurriedly helped to untie the restraints. There was a soft laugh coming from the room. When Lu Dongjiang heard it, it was as if he had been struck by lightning. He carefully raised his head and glanced at Chu Lushan. Seeing that this fatty was not acting strangely, he suppressed the urge to reprimand him. He was annoyed at this mischievous daughter of his. How could she be so troublesome? Normally, she relied on the old ancestors' pampering and mischievous style. Today, at such a critical time when the rise and fall of the family was at stake, she still did not know how to restrain herself. Let's see how he would deal with her when she returned home. Chu Lushan entered the room with incense burners in the four corners. He sniffed and felt relaxed and happy. The fatty looked over and smiled. This was indeed a first-class large family in Qingzhou. The East and West burners were the East Yu plum green incense burner and the West Chu pink five-legged incense burner. The North and South burners were the West Shu brown glazed lotus stem aromatherapy burner and the Longquan Dotsai porcelain burner. Just these four little burners, which were originally tributes to the imperial palace, were worth a lot of silver. Chu Lushan glanced at the incense burners as if there was no one else around. Only then did he look at the old man sitting on a couch in front of him. His beard and eyebrows were snow white, and his two long eyebrows hung down. He wore a warm smile, which made him appear even more benevolent and kind, and his aura was otherworldly. This was probably the pinnacle of the nourishing beauty residence. Beside the old man was a young and graceful woman gently massaging his back. She was the one who had laughed out loud at Chu Lushan's embarrassment when he stepped through the door. The old man saw Chu Lushan standing in the room without the courtesy of a junior or the attitude of a subordinate. He didn't take it to heart. He only smiled and patted the back of the woman's hand. Go get a chair for General Chu. There was a large yellow pear-wood chair tailor-made for Chu Lushan in the room. It was a small and luxurious chair that had to be hastily made by a craftsman. From this, one could see how much importance the Lu family placed on Chu Lushan. In reality, the carpenter was still under house arrest by the Lu family for fear that someone with ulterior motives would find clues because of the chair. He was lucky that he hadn't been killed to silence him. While his great-granddaughter was moving the chair, the old man, who was still one of the four pillars of the imperial court, smiled and said, "General Chu, don't lower yourself to Yen-er's level. She's used to being spoiled at home and doesn't understand etiquette." Ancestor. The woman protested coquettishly to show her dissatisfaction. However, after moving the chair, she didn't forget to give Chu Lushan a small bow. She didn't show the disgust of seeing a fat pig or the fear of hearing of Lu Qiu's reputation as an ordinary woman. One of the few remaining elders of the Green Party saw this and smiled slightly. Chapter 224. This woman was the oval-faced beauty who made tea for His Royal Highness a few days ago on the Yellow Dragon ship. After Su Fingnian made the Qingzhou Navy lose face, in the following days, she was the least afraid of the gossip of her friends on the ship. She was even touched by Bailiang's crown prince many times. These few days, Qingzhou seemed to be calm, but under the surface, the Qingzhou aristocracy received a few secret letters from the capital. The rest of the Qingzhou aristocracy who had a similar reputation to Lu Feiqi were still in the imperial court in the capital. The contents of the letters they sent back were exactly the same. In summary, it could be summed up in one word: wait. The fat on Chu Lushan's cheeks trembled slightly as he smiled and said, "It's fine, it's fine. Miss Lu has made tea for His Highness before. It's fine even if she comes up and slaps Chu Lushan a few times." The young woman who just sat beside the old ancestor asked innocently, "Really?" Lu Feiqi unknowingly increased his tone and said, "Don't be presumptuous." The young woman immediately lowered her eyes and carefully massaged the old ancestor's shoulders. Lu Feiqi still seemed unsatisfied and said calmly, "Didn't you say you were hungry 2 hours ago? Go ask your father for some supper." Lu Qingyan made an "oh" sound and secretly stuck out her tongue. She unwillingly got off the bed and left the room. After closing the door, she saw her father's sour face. She walked closer and held Lu Dongjiang's arm and said coquettishly, "My good father, who are you angry at? I will scold him for you." Lu Dongjiang said helplessly. In the end, he couldn't bear to scold his beloved daughter. Firstly, she was the smartest among the children. Secondly, the old ancestor was good at reading faces and doted on his great-granddaughter. In the 3 generations of the family, there were close to 100 people. Even Lu Dongjiang himself didn't have the qualifications to be personally taught by the old ancestor. However, Yen had followed the old ancestor and learned to read since she was young. Lu Dongjiang walked to the bow of the boat and stood against the wind. He was really handsome. At that time, there were many women in Qingzhou who adored him, but in the end, Lu Dongjiang only married a woman from an ordinary family in Qingzhou under the arrangement of the old ancestor. Therefore, Lu Qingyan's birth mother could only be considered virtuous, but not knowledgeable. These years, she had been teased by her peers and friends. Lu Dongjiang also liked to travel with prostitutes. He also had some friendship with Li Baishe, who was both beautiful and unbeautiful in Xiangfan City. Therefore, there were some common poems in the scholarly circle. Lu Dongjiang's second daughter was personally married off to Beiliang by the old ancestor. However, this son-in-law of an aristocratic family had no deep connection with a prince with a different surname. His family was at the bottom of the second class in Beiliang and was far from being worthy of the Lu family. It was no wonder that his second daughter complained every time she returned to her parents' home. This time, Wei Wei arbitrarily used the yellow dragon worship to provoke them. Lu Dongjiang was the first to receive the news and immediately wanted to stop his daughter who wanted to join in the fun. However, the old ancestor, who had not paid attention to worldly affairs for many years, unexpectedly acted out of character and refuted his actions. As for today's private meeting with Chu Lushan on the Spring God Lake, it didn't seem to be an impromptu idea. Lu Dongjiang was undoubtedly kept in the dark about all of this. He didn't even know as much as his daughter. This made Governor Lu, who had a smooth career, a little discouraged. Lu Qingyan skipped over to the bow of the ship to tease a young man who had been brought back by the old ancestor when he was young. This man of sacrifice, who could kill several martial artists raised by the Lu family at the age of 10, followed the Lu family's surname and was named Dou. The most extraordinary thing was that this person had double pupils, which was rare even in the vast history of the Qing dynasty. That was, one eye contained 2 pupils. Lu Dongjiang didn't have any good feelings about this young man and even somewhat didn't dare to look him in the eye. If Lu Dou wasn't a servant that the old ancestor especially valued, and if Yen wasn't saved from the claws of a wild bear when she was young, Lu Dongjiang really wouldn't be willing to get close to him. For some reason, Yen was very close to this person of the same age as her and he only smiled at Yen Lu Qingyan patted the Lu family's trusted man of sacrifice who was clad in heavy armor and asked with a smile, Lu Dou, can you beat that Lu Qiu, It's that fatty. The young man nodded without hesitation. Lu Dongjiang panicked and whispered, Yen don't talk nonsense. There was a touch of disdain in the young man's eyes that did not match his identity, but it was hidden very deeply and disappeared in a flash. However, when he turned to face Lu Qingyan, his determined face was still sincere and kind. After an hour, Lu Qiu walked out of the room. Lu Dongjiang and Lu Qingyan naturally had to send her off personally. Lu Qiu intentionally or unintentionally glanced at the man of sacrifice Lu Dou standing at the bow of the ship with a strange smile on the corner of her mouth. Lu Dongjiang waited for the ship to leave before he pulled Lu Qingyan back to the old ancestor's room. Seeing that the old ancestor showed signs of fatigue that was difficult to hide, Lu Qingyan hurriedly went forward to massage his shoulders and back. Lu Feiqi of the Pillar Kingdom, whose hair was as white as snow, glanced sideways at his grandson who was considered the most accomplished in the family. He stretched out his hand to signal the uneasy Lu Dongjiang to pick a chair and sit down. After the latter sat down meticulously, he quietly murmured with emotion, the people of Qingzhou are not lacking in intelligence, but they can't get rid of this craftsmanship. Gu Jintang's ability has never been weak. It's just that when compared to Su Shao, he has this deadly old-fashioned craftiness. Looking again at his great-granddaughter Lu Qingyan, Lu Feiqi smiled and the fatigue on his face dissipated a little. He once again faced his grandson Lu Dongjiang and said earnestly, Wen Tai, Hong Lingshu, and the other old fellows must be watching this time. Their secret letters to their descendants are nothing more than waiting for Su Shao in the imperial court to suffer another setback, and waiting for the king of Jing'an to teach the domineering heir of Beiliang a lesson. Only then will they be willing to state their position. But they don't know that there is no such thing as a stable and good thing in the world. In the end, they are unwilling to let go of the little knot that Su Shao suffered a lot in the past. They have forgotten that living to our age, in the end, is just to seek good fortune for our descendants. Seeing that Lu Dongjiang only nodded in agreement, Lu Feiqi sighed and waved his hand. You can leave first. Let Yan accompany me for a chat. Lu Dongjiang was still polite and left the room without leaving a trace. The old man retracted his gaze. The Pillar Kingdom slowly closed his eyes and shook his head. Tell me the truth, do you like that man with double pupils? Lu Qingyan smiled. I quite like him. If I don't like him, how would little Do be willing to work for him? The old man squinted his eyes and smiled. That's right. It's a pity that your father doesn't know the weight of the word affection. Chapter 225. Affection. Lu Qingyan was at a loss. Of course, she understood the importance of affection. There were thousands of ways to control people in the rich and powerful families. To put it bluntly, it was a combination of kindness and power. Since kindness was first followed by power, it naturally meant that affection was important. However, when it came from the old ancestor's mouth, the weight seemed to be much heavier than she had imagined. The old consecrator of the Green Party, who had seen the vicissitudes of life, turned his head to look at the plum-green incense burner. Its shape was like a spiral mountain range, engraved with the three celestial mountains of Penglai, Bo, and Yingzhou. 3 wisps of purple smoke curled up from the hollow mountain, creating a mysterious scene. Lu Qingyan had been with the old ancestor for many years. When she realized that the aroma had faded, she immediately ran to add more charcoal. The incense in the burner was made from ambergris imported from the South Sea. It was sandwiched with the unique water grass of Qingzhou and made into a fragrant cake. Therefore, the aroma was moderately rich and lingered for a long time. The smoke was not heavy and did not choke the nose. Lu Feiqi retracted his gaze and said softly, accompanying the emperor is like accompanying a tiger. The smart people around the emperor can be divided into 3 levels of intelligence. The great talents help the people and are the best people who help the country. The blue-eyed Zhang Julu is undoubtedly this type of person. The middle ones can guard a province and control several counties. If they are used too much, they will cause chaos and bring disaster to the country. If they are used too little, it will be a waste of talent. Our Qingzhou's Wen Tai and Hong Lingshu are all in this category. If your father, Lu Dongjiang, can train himself in the future, he can also barely be considered. The lowest are those who only know how to flatter the emperor. Their talents are average, but they are born to be observant. Yan do you know why the great talents who have assisted the emperor in the past have not ended up as good as the little talents? Lu Qingyan whispered, great merits intimidate the emperor. Lu Feiqi did not comment and said indifferently, isn't it true that the king of Beiliang, Su Shao, has great merits intimidated the emperor? Why can this butcher live to this day, divide the land and seal the border, and have 300,000 elite soldiers in his hands? There is no other reason than affection. When interacting with the emperor, affection far surpasses talent. Why can the eunuchs participate in politics and why can the relatives of the emperor hold power? Wasn't it because of the monarch's sentiments? The relationship between Su Shao and the late emperor was less than that between father and son, but more than that between brothers. It was not easy. Therefore, even after the late emperor passed away, this friendship was more or less passed down to the current emperor. When they fought for the throne, Su Shao just looked on coldly from the sidelines. This was not a merit but a friendship that ordinary people did not know. Later, when Empress Xiao Zhi wanted to recruit the Crown Prince of Beiliang as her son-in-law, when Tai and the others felt that the relationship between the emperor and Su Shao was over. They were anxious to hit Su Shao when he was down, so they joined Sun Shiji and the other old thieves in the court. Zhao Zhi's breadth of mind wasn't simple. In my opinion, half of it was because she wanted to test Su Zhao's bottom line, and the other half was because she wanted to protect Beiliang and the Su family. Even if Su Shao refused, she wouldn't really get angry. This time, Su Shao came to the capital. How was it? Didn't he still get it and inherit it? If it was someone else, even if it was the king of Yan, would he have succeeded? Lu Qingyan carefully said, "Old ancestor, how much of the relationship between ruler and subject that the king of Beiliang painstakingly accumulated in his military life is left?" Lu Feiqi smiled and said, "There isn't much left. No matter how much affection there is, it can't withstand Su Zhao's repeated torment. It's just that the king of Yan, the king of Guangling, and the other vassals are still alive. The late emperor didn't let Gu Jiantang rush to Beiliang to become the king of a different surname. Gu Jiantang was too slick and didn't want to make enemies. How could the late emperor be at ease to let him go thousands of li away to become the king? Su Shao, this cripple, is clumsy in his sharpness. Gu Jintang's maturity can't compare." In the past, there were people in the dynasty who said that if Su Zhao's troops were handed over to Gu Jiantang, he could still destroy the 6 states. These words weren't false. It's just that in the end, he couldn't escape being cooked after the cunning rabbit has been caught. This old consecrator who had lived in Qingzhou for a long time smiled slightly and said, "I'll tell you some more things. The reason why we took the risk to come to Spring God Lake was because the qi that our green faction had gathered for 2 generations with great difficulty had dissipated. That Bai Yan was amazing. He had only been in power for a few years and he had already made old man when obedient. If that was all, it wouldn't be so bad. But Hong Lingshu, this old bastard, originally wanted to push a few of his useless sons to the top before he came down. One of them would enter the capital to become the big yellow sect, another would become the county chief, and the remaining one, who couldn't read or write, would go to Wei and ask for the Qingzhou Navy. Everything was ruined by Bai Yan and he even handed Yongling County to old man Wen's favorite disciple. Hong Lingshu was good at everything, but he was too narrow-minded. Although he could see that this was Bai Yan's overt scheme, he still couldn't help but be angry. After a while, he completely distanced himself from old man Wen. The remaining few old fellows in Qingzhou who could speak in the imperial court also refused to stop. They were either secretly roped in by Gu Jiantang or flirting with people like the Grand Preceptor of West Chu, Sun Shiji. Actually, anyone could see the future of the Green faction, but when it came to themselves, they couldn't care about the big picture. Our Qingzhou has long been condemned by the ancients as forgetting righteousness for the sake of profit. Lu Qingyan giggled. If the old ancestor was still in the capital, he wouldn't have allowed them to act so recklessly. Lu Feiqi rubbed his great-granddaughter's head, squinted his eyes and smiled, "You little bootlicker." The old man sighed, "How am I not a person who forgets righteousness for the sake of profit? I can only laugh at these old farts in front of you, little girl. Who knows, it might be their turn to silently criticize me tomorrow." Lu Qingyan snorted, "How dare they? Yan will let Lu Dou kill their whole family tomorrow." Lu Feiqi stroked his beard and laughed heartily. There are very few truly smart people in this world, but there are also very few truly stupid people. Your father's so-called descendants of wealthy families don't really understand this principle. It's just that the world is peaceful now, and they can't bear to see the tragic people's hearts stirred during troubled times. The Lu family's aides and officials who wish they could dig out their hearts and organs to call themselves loyal are not that important in my opinion. Scholars from poor families only study for food and clothing, while nobles only study for a bright future. Those who study for righteousness and wisdom are few and far between. It's a pity that so many history books that recorded the bloody lessons of our ancestors have been lost. Lu Qingyan nodded. Of course, scholars who study for nothing are useless. Only those who study for a living can be considered inferior in all aspects. Only by studying for a living can one be considered superior. Chapter 226. The old man laughed and praised, "You have to let your father hear this." Lu Qingyan made a naughty face. "That won't do. Father will definitely nag at Yen about this and that." Lu Feiqi restrained his smile and slowly got up with Lu Qingyan's help. He walked to the window and sighed softly. It's not strange that Crown Prince Xiao Sun lost to His Highness Bailiang, but it's interesting that even King of Jing'an, who was determined to cut off all means of retreat, couldn't keep him. This is interesting. Just now, Chu Lushan said that he wouldn't fight back even if you slapped him. Yen, don't think that it was a joke. This smiling Lu Qiu, is very serious. Lu Qingyan exclaimed in surprise, "It's the truth." Yen, I thought it was a joke to warm up the atmosphere. Lu Feiqi smiled faintly, "That's why I'm prepared to let you enter Bailiang Palace. I don't expect to be the official wife, but I'm going to ask for a concubine for you. In terms of courage, those two old fellows, Wen and Hong, have never been able to match me in their entire lives." Lu Qingyan, who had been praised by her ancestor as having telepathy since she was young, had some guesses. But after hearing it with her own ears, she was still shocked and didn't dare to speak for a while. Lu Feiqi patted the back of her hand and said kindly, "Go, watch the incense burner. This thing can't be careless." Watching his great-granddaughter run to the incense burner and fiddle with the charcoal fire, the old man looked at the lake. The breeze brushed his face and his white beard fluttered in the wind. It was truly an extraordinary style. After thinking for a while, he said softly, "Yen, give Lu Do to Chu Lushan tomorrow. This Yangfan city's fire is right." Lu Qingyan obediently said, "Oh." Lu Feiqi turned around and picked up a piece of old ginger from the food box on the shelf. He put it in his mouth and suddenly asked, "I heard that His Royal Highness is very handsome." Lu Qingyan was startled and raised her head with a smile. "He's very good-looking." Lu Feiqi slowly chewed on the slightly spicy ginger and stroked his beard with squinted eyes. "It seems that he's half as handsome as our ancestor back then." Lu Qingyan stretched out a finger and drew a line on her cheek. "Ancestor, you're shameless." The old man was not angry. He walked over and bent down to wipe away the black charcoal on his great-granddaughter's face. He said dotingly, "Married daughters are like spilled water. You're not even married and you're already siding with an outsider. I've doted on you for all these years in vain." Lu Qingyan's eyes suddenly turned red. She sobbed and shouted, "I won't get married. I won't get married." Lu Feiqi chuckled and said, "Silly girl." The old ancestor's final words to Yen were, "Marry and follow your husband." If you really want our Lu family to prosper, when the old ancestor enters the coffin in the future, regardless of what your parents say or how the family begs you, you must remember to think of your husband first. This is the foundation for the Lu family to stand out from the chaos in Qingzhou. Your handsome future husband was able to make the king of Jing and take such a risk. Half of it is his ability, and the other half is his lack of maturity. However, he's still young. As long as he has the spirit, it's not impossible for him to be a king of Bailiang who won't lose to Lame Su. The old man looked at the starry sky and whispered a sentence that made Lu Qingyan confused, occupying the north and looking south, a python swallowing a dragon. Su Fengnian did not go near the bonfire where Ningame was. Instead, he lay on the grass at the top of the hill and stared at the bright Milky Way in a daze. Not long ago, he had fed Bluebird the Dragon Tiger Golden Elixir, which was extremely precious in the Taoist master's residence. There were only 2 in a box. It was said that it could prolong one's life and was no different from prolonging one's life. It was only slightly inferior to the elixir refined by Qi Xianzhu. Back then, when the old god of swords Li Chungang went to the demon-slaying platform of Dragon Tiger Mountain, he asked for the elixir that was rumored to be able to bring the dead back to life. Therefore, when he saw the 2 Dragon Tiger golden elixirs after the box was opened, the knowledgeable Li Chungang asked if he was willing to give it to the maid in green. The old god of swords' original intention was that the maid's injuries were no longer serious and that her survival was certain. This priceless golden elixir was not necessary and seemed to be a waste. Unexpectedly, His Royal Highness calmly said that he was willing and then directly asked when the second golden elixir was suitable to be consumed. The old man wearing the sheepskin coat came to His Royal Highness' side and sat down. He pulled out a piece of licorice and held it in his mouth. He lamented, "The sky is like a dome that covers the wilderness. Who isn't a frog in the well?" Su Fengnian laughed, "Old senior, this doesn't sound like something you would say." The old god of swords curled his lips and said self-deprecatingly, in front of the little mud man, "Of course I have to put on the airs of an expert. Otherwise, how can I trick her into practicing swordplay with this old man?" Su Fengnian rolled his eyes and imitated the old god of swords to pull out a piece of licorice. He flicked away the dirt and put it in his mouth to chew. He said vaguely, "It's sweet. In the past, I used to sleep in this kind of desolate place with old Huang. There was no bed or blanket. I would curse when I had nothing to do. When I was really out of energy, old Huang would pass me this kind of licorice." The old god of swords said calmly, "Those few strokes of yours in the reed marsh must be the 9 swords of the 9 swords of the 9 swords of the 9 swords of the 9 swords. Although this old man has never seen this person use his sword, the first 8 swords are still okay and can only be considered ordinary superior swordsmanship. The 9th sword, however, is truly the style of a master. How long have you secretly practiced it for?" Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "I only read the sword manual and have never really practiced it. I don't know why I was able to use it during the day." Old man Li's face was full of doubt. Su Fengnian sat up and turned his head to ask, "Old senior, why didn't you accept the sword case?" The old god of swords laughed and said, "Then why didn't you eagerly flip through that peerless sword manual?" Su Fengnian lay down again and crossed his legs. The old god of swords laughed loudly and said, "If the heavens didn't give birth to me, Li Chungang, the path of the sword would be as long as the night." Su Fengnian said helplessly, "You can boast about this to Ginger Mud." The old god of swords stood up and kicked off the little rascal's crossed legs. He said angrily, "Get up. This old man will let you know if these words are boasting or not." Su Fengnian was stunned and said in disbelief, "Are you going to teach me superior swordsmanship?" The old man sneered and said, "Superior swordsmanship is nothing in the eyes of the world. This old man will teach you the green snake in 2 sleeves tonight." Chapter 227. The Heavenly Platform of the Imperial Astronomer. In addition to numerous complicated observation instruments, the top floor was also used to store books. The 3 walls of books were several feet high, so many ladders were needed to hold the books. It was already late at night. Only an old man and his errand boy were there. The old man had read too much that his eyes were hurt. With an ancient book under his arm, he staggered out of the inner room and came to the path of picking stars that protruded out of a wall. This path abruptly extended out of the attic and was about 6 feet long. It was inlaid with 81 large pieces of white marble, glittering and translucent. Walking on the road and looking down, timid people's legs would definitely tremble. Standing here, one could have a panoramic view of the imperial palace, which was against the rules. Therefore, there was no record of the heavenly platform in any map or document of the current dynasty. The old man walked to the end of the Jade Road and looked up. The little attendant hurried to put on a coat for Jianzheng. The little attendant with red lips and white teeth was not afraid of heights. He sat down on the side and dangled his feet in the air. He accompanied the old man to look at the vast starry sky, lost in thought. The little attendant asked softly, "Grandpa Jianjing, can you really see anything?" "I heard from Lord Chiahu that he saw with his own eyes 8 great pillars of qi rising into the sky from the territories of the 8 kingdoms, and then they collapsed one by one. Now, only our Liang dynasty is left, and it reaches the heaven." Since he was called Jianjing, he was naturally the first person in the imperial astronomer, Nan Huayu. The old man gathered his coat and smiled. "I'm old and my eyes are not good. I can't see clearly." The young attendant said disapprovingly, "Grandpa Jianjing, you have heaven's eye. Can't you see clearly?" The old man smiled helplessly. "Heaven's eye. Can you believe Huang Sanjia's words? That little bookcase, that old bastard wants to use the position under my butt to lay out the layout for him. You can't take it seriously. If we talk about heaven's eye, he has it. My qigong is far inferior." The attendant said, "No, didn't Grandpa Jianjing play 2 games of chess with that Huang Sanjia? You lost first and then won. How can you be worse than him? Next, he can only call himself Huang Liangjia." The old eunuch shook his head and said, "No, no. It's just that halfway through the game, Huang Sanjia didn't want to continue. Although I had the upper hand on the chessboard, he would be defeated if he played another 10 moves. Back then, I thought it would be a draw. 10 years ago, I thought that I would lose in 20 moves. Now that I thought about it, there were only 10 moves left. God knows if in a few days, I would think that I would lose in 5 moves. Maybe before I died, I would find out that Huang Sanjia only needed 1 move to turn the tables." Wang Jixin said that Huang Longshi's play was like Huayin's use of troops to conquer every enemy. These words were clearly a foreign language from someone who had only read the book and not personally played the game. It should have been Huayin's decision to deploy more troops. Huang Sanjia's true strength was in the mid-game. Only in the endgame could one see his foundation. It was a pity that there was no one in the world who could compete with him in the endgame. Presumably, this was the real reason he instigated the Spring and Autumn War. After all, a 3-chi chessboard was too small for him. Nan Huayu, who was treated as a state preceptor by His Majesty, called Little Bookcase, smacked his lips and said, "Then isn't this demon really invincible? Is it true that no one can beat him in chess?" The old man thought for a moment and said with a smile, "It seems that no one can beat him, but there are some who can draw." The boy's eyes lit up. He pulled on old Jian Zheng's sleeve and asked impatiently, "Who is it?" The old man was afraid that Little Bookcase beside him would catch a cold. He first had the boy sit up and then put a book under the boy's butt. Then he said slowly, "Back then, the late emperor personally came out to welcome him. Hundreds of thousands of Great Peace City's citizens lined the streets to welcome him." "Little Bookcase, who do you think it is?" The boy exclaimed, I know. The white-robed monk, the immortal who proposed enlightenment in the 2 Zen temples." "Grandpa Jianjing, can you really become a Buddha? Does that mean that I'll become a Buddha just by standing there? If that's true, then I also want to become a monk." Old Jianjing said with a heavy tone, "I don't know if enlightenment is real or fake. I'm not a Buddhist after all. Even if I've read some Buddhist scriptures, I can't speak nonsense. But it's true that cultivating means spending money, practicing Zen, and spreading luck. If the ruler of a country is obsessed with Buddhism, it's definitely not a good thing. It's fine if you worship old Huang's purity. It's a waste of the country's wealth. It can be taken from the people and used by the people. But if you worship Buddha, it's hard to say. Once luck is scattered, gathering it again is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. When Buddhism first entered the Central Lands, it was criticized. It's not just the superficial ambiguity between Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. In reality, it's because Confucianism and Taoism, who value qi the most, are worried that Buddhism will ruin the momentum of the Central Lands. The boy said with a bitter expression, "Then I'd better not be a monk." The old man smiled and rubbed the boy's head. The boy raised his head and asked, "Grandpa Jianjing, that king of Bailiang came to our imperial astronomer during the day. Why is everyone so afraid?" "I'm not afraid." Old Jianjing stood and said, "It's good that you're not afraid. All right, we've slacked off enough. We should go back to work. After we finish editing this new calendar, I should close my eyes. If that white-robed monk gets there first, it'll be another immeasurable disaster. Fortunately, this old man who's about to die has the help of you, little bookcase. I reckon that I won't be able to be a human in my next life. This is the fate of revealing the secrets of heaven." The little attendant looked sorrowful. Nan Huayu squinted his eyes with some difficulty and turned to look at Bailiang. He pointed and said softly, "Little bookcase, after I die, I'll rely on you to suppress that giant python." There were 2 big bunches of bonfires. Old Taoist Wei and a few other unusual retainers, as well as Yu Wei and Jiang and I, these womenfolk, occupied one bundle. The Phoenix Battalion surrounded the other bundle. The 2 bunches were far apart, which was a very well-behaved way of avoiding suspicion. Even though Pei Nanwei was a fallen phoenix, she still tried to maintain the dignified posture of Princess Jing'an. She had nothing to do, so she paid attention to the movements of the Phoenix Battalion. She could see the light cavalry who took turns to be on night duty coming and going in an orderly manner. After the battle, the 2 generals were seriously injured, but no matter if it was the generals or the soldiers, there was no dejection on their faces. Looking at their lips, it seemed that they were all talking about His Royal Highness. They were all in high spirits. The more united the Phoenix barracks became, the more uncomfortable Princess Consort Pei felt. Her original desire to escape from her prison gradually faded. How could a lowly prisoner who had fallen so low that she had to clean the carriages compare to the one and only Princess Consort Jing'an in Qingzhou? Pei Nanwei was disheartened. She reached out to the bonfire and warmed up a little. She looked to the left side and saw a plump beautiful woman holding a white cat accompanying her to find a pool. They chatted a little on the way, and she knew that their conversation was not ordinary. The young woman with a strange identity on the right side was really smart. Pei Nanwei, as a peerless beauty, still didn't dare to say that in a few years, she would be able to win over this plainly dressed woman. It didn't look like she was a maid. How could there be a maid who could fight with the heir of Bailiang? But it also wasn't right to say that she was a daughter of a noble family. That pair of rough little hands that couldn't be described as white jade and creamy were obviously a child from a poor family. This Bailiang was indeed full of strange people. She couldn't figure them out. Pei Nanwei couldn't help but look in the direction where His Royal Highness disappeared. What was this shameless bastard doing? Bailiang Palace, Tide Listening Pavilion. That night, White Fox's face, with the peerless saber at her waist, climbed to the 3rd floor. Chapter 228. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. In the small hut at the foot of the mountain in the shade of the 2 Zen temples, there was a loud snoring sound. It was an unattractive young woman. She spread her arms and legs and took up most of the bed. She turned around aggressively and accidentally kicked the bald middle-aged monk off the bed. The poor monk sat on the ground in a daze for a while. He got up and put on a white kasaya and walked out of the hut. There were 2 small rooms next door separated by wooden boards. The white-robed monk tiptoed to his daughter's room and covered her with a blanket. This girl's sleeping posture was exactly the same as her mother's, restless. When he came to his disciple's room, he saw that this little idiot was most likely having a good dream. She probably dreamt that she went to play with something and only cared about laughing. The shabbily decorated narrow room was neat and tidy. The shoes and socks of the 2 women in the house were always scattered all over the place. This stupid north and south were not the same. Everything was meticulously arranged, just like when he preached the sutras to the monks of the Hui generation in the temple. The white-robed monk walked out of the hut alone and came to the Thousand Buddha Hall. The walls were painted with the Vajra-Luohan fist technique, vivid and lifelike. The ground was uneven, with a total of 108 small footprints. It was rumored in Jianghu that this was the most powerful demon-subduing skill of the two Zen temples. Whoever could face the wall and observe the fist technique and walk 108 steps correctly would be ranked among the top 3 martial artists in the world. The reason why this hall was called the Thousand Buddha Hall was because the two Zen temples carved a Buddha here every year. There were more than 1,000 Buddha statues here. The white-robed monk was this generation's tablet keeper and also this generation's Thousand Buddha Hall statue monk. Standing at the door of the hall and looking out, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in all directions were the same. Compared to the 3-sided fish technique manual, it was even more magnificent. The first patriarch of the two Zen temples had left behind a Buddhist saying that anyone who entered the hall and saw or heard it would receive the seed of Bodhi liberation. A couplet hung in the hall: "It has been 3,000 years since lotuses bloomed at every step. I have rebuilt the hall to worship the Luohan. After 81 difficulties, I am willing to give 28 ranks and teach the Dharma to all." However, ever since the white-robed monk returned from the far west to Tai and city and returned to the two Zen temples, he had only carved one Luohan statue. That year, he had brought the little monk's stupid Nanbei back to the mountain. The white-robed monk looked up at the thousands of Buddha statues that were filled with moonlight after the door was opened inside. The little monk, Wu Nanbei, appeared behind the white-robed monk and asked worriedly, "Master, is your wife going down the mountain again tomorrow?" The white-robed monk accepted his fate and said, "Go, go. There aren't many copper coins left in the bowl anyway. Stupid north and south side, after going down the mountain a few times, I can only pick the most expensive cosmetics with mistress. What are we going to do in the future? Why are you awake? Just now, I was holding hands with something in my dream. In the end, she knocked me on the head and I woke up. Hey, master, why are you hitting me? What else did you do besides holding hands?" "No, just holding hands. What else can we do?" "Really? Monks don't lie. There are so many bodhisattvas and arhats in the Thousand Buddhas Hall watching you." Other than holding her hand, I also told this thing that I like her. No wonder you were hit." "Master, the old abbot said that you are the reincarnation of the third arhat, the immaculate arhat. The Buddhist scriptures say that this bodhisattva has no worries. Why do you always have a bitter face for mistress and that thing?" The great abbot also said that you are the last disciple of Buddha, Subhadhara. You received the bodhisattva fruit when Buddha was about to enter nirvana. It sounds very powerful. Why don't I see your wisdom and eloquence? Not to mention the temple and the foot of the mountain, we only have 4 people in the hut. Who can you argue with? Alas, the old abbot likes to praise everyone. There is nothing to be happy about being praised. "Master, why don't you teach me how to play chess?" "Why do you want to learn chess?" "Mistress bought 2 boxes of chess at the foot of the mountain, but she doesn't know how to play. Mistress said that she can't beat you, so she can only play with me. My daughter is the smartest in the world, but learning chess is really not that amazing. Maybe she can't beat you. Master's copper coins will be wasted." "It's okay, I'll let her." "Idiot. How many games can you let her go?" "My whole life. Anyway, I'll just have to wait until I cultivate the Saraira. It's actually only a few decades." "Okay, master hasn't touched chess for some years. Go and get the chess box. Now. How can I dare to go to mistress' room? I'll be beaten to death. I also don't dare to run. What if I run into the steel forest like before and mistress can't find me? Mistress will only give me half a bowl of rice. Where the Tao is, even if there are millions of people, I will still go. Don't you understand this principle? What's the point of practicing Buddhism? Master, isn't this the famous saying of the scholarly sage at the foot of the mountain? Is that so? It's absolutely true. Alas, I always heard the abbot in the temple say that you are very good at the once-in-a-decade lotus platform preaching. Even those scholars and Taoist masters admire you. It seems that they are bragging. Master, did you secretly give them copper coins? Nonsense. Isn't Mistress keeping an eye on Master's private money? Didn't you ask me to bury the pot under the Dragon Gate 20 stages stone tablet 2 days ago? Ha, Nanbei, the moon is pretty good today. Wait here, Master will go and get the chess box. After a while, the white-robed monk came back with 2 boxes of chess pieces and a rough chess block made by the little monk. The master and disciple sat on the ground in the thousand Buddha hole. The white-robed monk rolled his eyes at the chess block with crooked lines and abandoned it. Instead, he used his finger to carve 17 lines on the floor. The floor of the hall was carefully paved with a special stone material. It was called the diamond mirror by the people. There was once a swordsman who had achieved Tao and cut it with a sharp sword but did not leave a mark. Therefore, the 108 clear footprints showed the power of a sage. The little monk Wu Nanbei was not surprised by the lines his master drew with his finger. He only said with a sad face, "Master, the abbot is fine. The other abbot will definitely talk to me for a few days and nights." The white-robed monk said nonchalantly, "Let them nag." The little monk said with grief and indignation, "But they don't want to talk to you, Master. They just won't let me go. Talk, talk, talk." This was the unique catchphrase of the strange family of 4 in this temple. The white-robed monk turned a deaf ear to it. He glanced at the 19 chess blocks and made a sound of surprise. He thought for a while and clapped his hands and laughed, "Wonderful, it's a pity there's no wine. Back then, Master played 2 games to a draw with an old hooligan like you." They were 15 and 17. He said angrily that if there were 19, I wouldn't be his opponent. But looking at the situation at that time, this hooligan wasn't willing to be the first to propose 19. Stupid Nanbei, do you know who came up with the idea? I think it's Su Fengnian's second sister. She's called Su Weisheng. This name is very impressive. This thing has been envious of you for a long time. She complained that you didn't care about the name at all. Ha, actually I think this thing's name is nice. I just don't dare to say this to this thing. It's Su Fengnian again. When Master goes back, I have to record how many cleavers he has in the account book. Master, you're recording cleavers every day now. If Su Fengnian really comes to the temple in the future, what should I do? Should I help this thing or you, Master? What do you think? I'll help Master first. When the time comes, I'll help this thing. Nanbei, Master really didn't see it before. Turns out you're not stupid. Isn't that so? If you're not stupid, then you're still stupid. When the day comes when you're not stupid, this thing will really not like you. Aw. Master, don't scare me. I won't be able to sleep at night. I won't have the energy to cook for you tomorrow. If that's the case, just pretend that Master didn't say that. Master, I don't want to learn chess anymore. I want to go outside and chant scriptures. Stupid Nanbei, Master told you that chanting scriptures is useless. The scriptures and the 1,000 Buddhas in this 1,000 Buddha hall are all dead things. If chanting scriptures could produce relics, the abbot would have burned tens of thousands of them. Let's not talk about this anymore. I'll teach you how to play chess. The white-robed monk only roughly explained the rules of chess. In the first round, he allowed 6 stones. Both the master and disciple placed their stones very quickly. The stupid Nanbei naturally lost. In the second round, he allowed 5 stones. The little monk still lost. In the third round, he allowed 4 stones. The little monk lost 3 rounds in a row. The white-robed monk frowned and said, "Nanbei, this won't do. How are you going to give this thing a handicap tomorrow and not let her see that you're giving her a handicap?" The little monk, who had a serious expression once he did something seriously, nodded and said, "Master, I'll play more seriously." In the fourth round, he only allowed 3 stones. According to common sense, the white-robed monk allowed fewer stones. Moreover, he didn't deliberately give the little monk a handicap. Naturally, the little monk's game should be getting worse and worse. In fact, after 4 rounds, the little monk's situation gradually improved. In the 5th round, the white-robed monk looked at the sky and said, "I won't give you any stones in this round. If you can last until the 160th round, you win. You can go play with this thing tomorrow." Chapter 229. The stupid North-South nodded vigorously. Just as he was about to start with the white piece, he accidentally saw an ant scurrying around in his cassock. The little monk smiled innocently and gently stretched out his 2 fingers that were still holding the chess piece. He let the little ant climb onto his hand and then placed it on the ground. After it was far away, he placed the chess piece on the Vajra mirror. In the end, the little monk had made more than 170 moves in this game. The monk in white did not continue. He smiled and said, "Are you asleep now?" The little monk touched his bald head and said happily, "Okay." The monk in white waved his hand and said, "Go, leave the chess set and the chess box." The little monk nodded and got up to leave the 1000 Buddha hole. The monk in white sat cross-legged and waited for his disciple to leave before returning to the hut. He then rested his chin on one hand and leaned his body to look at the chess game. The white-robed monk stretched his back and said softly, "Chao Zhangqing, you're still so patient. No wonder you're called Chao Guanzi." Apart from his words, the hall was still silent. The monk in white reached out and grabbed. The dozens of white chess pieces on the ground suddenly floated in the air. With a light flick, the chess pieces shot to the side like rain. After a while, a scholarly man dressed in a green robe appeared in the hall leisurely. He held the 16 chess pieces in his hand and flicked one chess piece with each move. The chess pieces were nowhere to be seen in the air. In the blink of an eye, 15 chess pieces were stuck to the monk's cassock. This frivolous monk who drank wine, ate meat, and even had a wife and a daughter did not move. However, the 1000 Buddha statues in the hall were shaking together as if they were being invaded by demons. Especially the few Vajra Bodhisattva statues. When they swayed back and forth, they were particularly intimidating. It must have been the 15 chess pieces that hit the monk's cassock. Each chess piece brought about a violent surge of chi activity and caused such a phenomenon. The handsome middle-aged scholar only had one chess piece left in his hand. He smiled and said, "Sure enough, no one in the world can break your Vajra realm." Without any movement from the monk in white, 15 white chess pieces fell from the cassock and quickly rolled back to their original positions on the Vajra mirror as if they were endowed with intelligence. The white-robed monk calmly replied, "It's just Chao Guanzi's 15 mysterious fingers. Why don't you take out a celestial phenomenon cultivator and try?" The slender scholar smiled and gently tossed the chess piece in his hand onto the ground. It bounced forward a few times and obediently returned to its original position just like the 15th chess piece. He shook his head and said, "I won't try anymore." Back then, the number 1 person in Beimang who was said to be able to fight with Qi Xianzhu came from the south. When you arrived at the 2 Zen temples, you still couldn't harm a hair on your body. However, in your anger, you left 108 Vajra prints on the ground. But I'm very curious. You always end up in a draw when you fight, but why do you still like to end up in a draw when you play chess? In the past, Huang Longsher used the lives of more than 300 monks to play against you, each playing one piece. In this game, 43 people died. Fortunately, you were able to draw. Later, after the Spring and Autumn War, Huang Longshe forced you to play again. However, he used the hundreds of Buddhist temples in the hundreds of counties in the world as chess pieces. If he lost, he would destroy one. If he won, he would let the Liang dynasty build one more. Why did you still end up in a draw? After I read the chess record, the chances of you winning the first game were indeed not high. However, in the second game, you clearly had a chance to beat Huang Longshe. The white-robed monk raised his head and looked at the world-famous Chao Guanzi. Similar to himself, this guy had also played chess with Huang Longshe. It was said that the two of them were close to the level of chess. Chao Guanzi was of course much better than those national chess players in the palace. However, in the face of this immortal in the eyes of the world, the white-robed monk was still as calm as an ancient well. He said calmly, "If I say that I'm in a hurry to go home and cook for my wife, would you believe me?" When Chao Guanzi heard this rare joke, he actually didn't laugh. He sighed and said regretfully, "Now that you even have a daughter, you don't have the patience to play chess with me until the end. It seems that I won't have the chance to play chess with you." The white-robed monk sneered and said, "Who wants to play chess with you? A game of chess can last for months or years." Chao Guanzi, whose real name was Chao Chongqing, was sitting opposite the white-robed monk. He looked at the chess game that he had already memorized by heart and said with a smile, "Your disciple is really amazing. No wonder he is regarded as the hope of the Dharma ending tribulation by Buddhism." The white-robed monk said calmly, "Chao Chongqing, my temper is actually not as good as you think. You are willing to play chess with me, but I am also not willing to fight with you. Here, I found some good wine for you in the palace." Chao Guanzi took the wine pot from his waist and threw it to the white-robed monk. Then he picked up a white chess piece with his left hand and gently placed it down. He seemed to know that the white-robed monk wouldn't play chess with him. His right hand picked up a black chess piece and placed it on the ground, creating a scene of self-entertainment. He said, "Don't worry, I would rather compete with Dong Tai's peach blossom branch than have anything to do with you. The world only knows that you are invincible, but I know the terror of your angry eyes." The white-robed monk drank a mouthful of wine and frowned. He asked, "That Korean cat didn't make you stay?" Chao Guanzi played chess on his left and right. He shook his head and said, "It was a coincidence that we didn't meet this time." The white-robed monk wiped his mouth and asked, "You are a scholar from West Chu who is in dire straits. Are you still thinking about finding the little princess who is blessed with destiny and reviving the country?" Chao Guanzi looked lonely and said, "Why wouldn't I? Everyone said that she died with the emperor, but I still don't believe that the little princess is dead. West Chu's dragon aura still exists, but the imperial astronomer doesn't dare to admit it." The white-robed monk raised his head and drank a mouthful of wine. "Chao Chongqing, are you here for my new calendar?" The Liang dynasty follows the old calendar and was originally following the will of the heavens. However, after annexing the 8 countries, it is obviously no longer appropriate. The imperial astronomer is busy with this, but I am not in a hurry. Are you thinking of doing something? Leaving a chance for your little princess to revive the country? Chao Guanzi suddenly stood up and bowed deeply. He didn't straighten his back for a long time. The white-robed monk sighed and said, "Chao Chongqing, do you really not know that this is a shady business against the will of the heavens? Don't you know what happened to Heavenly Master Ren on Mount Longhu?" Chao Guanzi, who had almost become the champion of Jianghu in one fell swoop and whose pride didn't lose to anyone, still didn't straighten his back. The white-robed monk hesitated for a moment and said in a deep voice, "It's not that I don't want to help, but the general trend is irresistible. The old West Chu can't succeed at all. So what if the Grand Preceptor, Sun Shiji, works from the inside and outside? Do you really think that everyone in the world is a fool who waits for death? Su Shao, Gu Jiantang, the 6 vassal kings are not dead. Now, Zhang Julu and the one in the palace, Chao Chongqing, oh Chao Chongqing. The sage only said that you should turn the tide, but the tide has passed and the general situation has been decided. What can you do? Not to mention you, even immortals like Qi Xuanjun can't do anything. Chao Guanzi straightened up and was speechless with a miserable expression. Outside the Thousand Buddha Hall, lightning flashed and thunder roared. Soon, it was raining heavily. The white-robed monk looked down at the white chess piece that Chao Guanzi had placed on behalf of his disciple and decided to ignore it. How could this be Chao Guanzi's flawless chess piece? For a moment, he felt a little sad and sighed deeply. Fine, fine. This pot of wine is good. I can only guarantee that the little princess of West Chu won't die. As for the rest, I can't help. If you want to take a mile after taking an inch, I will go down the mountain and ask the palace for a pot of wine to return to you. Chao Guanzi bowed again, turned around and walked into the rain. This was what it meant to go forward despite thousands of people. The heroic spirit of the Confucian school existed forever. Even though the white-robed monk was in Buddhism, he still felt a little sad. The little monk, who was about to fall asleep, was awakened by the thunder and hurriedly ran over with an oil paper umbrella. He saw that there was an extra pot of wine in his master's hand and thought of the middle-aged scholar who had just walked out of the Thousand Buddha Hall. He asked in puzzlement, "Master, is this wine given to you by that scholar?" The white-robed monk nodded. The stupid north-south put away the umbrella and grinned. "I put one up and took one. I met this scholar just now, so I borrowed one from him." The white-robed monk glared at him. "Why did you borrow it from him? It will take years to return it to you. An umbrella costs a lot of copper coins." The little monk was troubled. "Then what should I do? I preached in the temple, but the head abbot didn't give me any copper coins. If that thing asks about it tomorrow, it will be bad." The white-robed monk said helplessly, "Forget it. Just say that I bought the wine." The little monk shouted gratefully, "Master." The white-robed monk rolled his eyes. "Master needs to go to the sutra depository in the temple to hide from your master's wife. Go to sleep." The little monk said nervously, "Master, why don't I tell the truth to master's wife?" The white-robed monk stood up and knocked on his stupid disciple's head. "Idiot." The little monk smiled brightly. The white-robed monk said earnestly, "North-south, if master's wife gets angry tomorrow, at most you will have to eat less and work more. But when your master's wife is in a bad mood, she likes to go down the mountain to buy clothes that she can't wear more than a few times a year. This is all master's hard-earned money." The little monk suddenly understood. The white-robed monk smiled. Go to sleep." The little monk said, "That thing is afraid of thunder. I will go outside and recite scriptures for her." The white-robed monk touched his bald head. This disciple. Standing at the entrance of the Thousand Buddha Hall and looking at the stupid north-south who was running in the mud without caring about the rain, the white-robed monk murmured, "Stupid north-south, you have a Zen that doesn't let down Buddha in Qing." Chapter 230. In the night, White Fox stood in the outer corridor of the third floor of the Tide Listening Pavilion. It was hard to believe that this Bailiang Palace, which occupied an area second only to the king of Yan Qi among the 7 kings, did not have a single master. Not to mention the early death of the princess, Su Xiao, who had taken the title of Pillar of the State, was far away in the capital. Even His Royal Highness had run out of Bailiang. The eldest daughter Su Weisheng was still fine, as she was not judged by her appearance but by her talent. She was still studying in the Shangyin Academy, while the youngest son of the king of Bailiang, Huang Manor, Su Longxiang, was practicing in the Dragon Tiger Mountain. This made White Fox laugh at himself when he occasionally took a break. When he met Su Longxiang, who was no different from a refugee or a beggar, he had never thought that he would be able to climb to the 3rd floor of the arsenal today. He had already prepared for the worst-case scenario of doing business with the king of Bailiang, which was to read all the books in the Tide Listening Pavilion. Later, He borrowed Su Fingyan to embroider the winter and spring thunder sabers, but he did not regret or feel any heartache. For him, there was nothing to be reluctant to let go except to keep his life to practice the saber. White Fox put his hands on the cool railing, thinking a lot. Like the rest of the people, he used to have a big prejudice against Su Shao, who had conquered the world and built this honorable mansion. However, after staying here for more than a year and looking back at the hunchbacked and slightly lame old man, he always had a heartfelt admiration. The 11 barbarians inside and outside, those who dare to call themselves soldiers, will be beheaded immediately. The world's territory, the sun and the moon, the mountains and rivers, all are the subjects of the Liang dynasty. These two bold words were not the armchair strategists of those poets and writers, but the words of the ignorant man Su Shao, who had been criticized by scholars for many years because of his lack of knowledge. What was more commendable was that Su Shao almost did it. This was simply inconceivable. "Mr. Nangong, it's rare to see you slacking off." A cold voice came from behind White Fox, with a slight smile. Bai Hooer turned around and looked at the man in front of her. She shook her head and said, "I don't dare to be called Mr. by military advisor Li. Congratulations on reaching the 3rd floor. You're 1 year faster than I expected." The one who came was none other than the state scholar Li Shan. In the spring and autumn war, where talents emerged in large numbers and strategists resplendent, he was still the most outstanding. Back then, this person and Western Shu's Xiao Guangling were known as Su Rintu's left and right arms, left Xiao and right Li Shan. Generally speaking, one person was the strategist, the other the decisive. Among them, Xiao Guangling was proficient in Changyang stratagems, while Li Shan focused on scheming. Many of the schemes that harmed the virtue of the underworld came from his hands. The two worked together, their coordination was flawless. Xiao Guangling vomited blood and died in the territory of Western Shu. His merits and demerits could not escape the eyes of everyone. Li Shan stayed at the Tide Listening Pavilion to advise the king of Beiliang on the strategy. However, looking at his complexion, he was also terminally ill and did not look like someone who would live a long life. Indeed, when Western Shu was defeated, it was Li Shan who proposed to kill anyone above the wheel, regardless of whether they were women or children. Until now, when Li Shan was mentioned in Shu Prefecture, children would stop crying. How could such a person, who did not care about the virtues of the underworld, live a long life? Bai Hooer asked, "There's something I don't understand." "I'd like to ask military advisor Li." Li Shan nodded and smiled. "Please speak. I'll tell you everything I know." Bai Hooer was not a polite person to begin with. She asked directly, "The king of Beiliang is recognized as a talented general who can only lead an army, not a talented general who can lead a general." During the spring and autumn war, the other 3 famous generals were rarely like the king of Beiliang, who always led the troops in every battle. The Battle of the Western Fortress was undoubtedly the most magnificent war in history. However, he still boldly handed over the command to Yuan Chen Jibao and personally led the elite cavalry to attack the enemy's den. Why can the Beiliang army only have the surname Su and not others? Li Shan looked at the tide listening lake, which was always quiet without any bait. He smiled gently and said, "Xiao Guangling and I had argued about this before. Neither of us could convince the other. The answer does not lie with me. It lies with Su Shao and Su Fingyan. Mr. Nangong can continue to look on coldly from the sidelines. It's a pity that Xiao Guangling was born in a chaotic era. Otherwise, he would have been a capable minister who could govern the world. He wouldn't be worse than Zhang Julu. At that time, the biggest disagreement between us was who would be in charge of the Beiliang army in the future. Would it be a descendant of the Su family or someone else? That's why I told Su Shao that it was fortunate that Xiao Guangling died early. With his unyielding character and his hatred of evil, regardless of whether His Royal Highness was a real hedonist or a real foppish son, he was still an eyesore. As for me, I'm probably not as good as him when it comes to strategizing, but my temper is much better. That's why I've been able to live longer than him. Why else do you think Su Fengnian would send me wine every 2 to 3 days? That kid is very shrewd. Zhao Guangling doesn't like this kind of petty cleverness. On the contrary, I admire it. Furthermore, when he was a military counselor, he would personally attend to everything in the military tent. I'm more lazy, so I can see many things and know more about the crown prince's temperament. I watched that kid grow up. That time, because of the armored maidservant Zhao Yute, he angered the princess consort. She punished him by raising his arms and holding 2 books to reflect on his mistakes. How old is he? How long can he hold that? He insisted on not admitting his mistake, but he also didn't want to be lazy. He held 1 book on top of his head and the other in his mouth. His temperament is exactly the same as the princess consort's. Of course, this small matter doesn't mean anything. It's hard to say whether His Royal Highness will be able to inherit the position and take over the 300,000 steel cavalry. Bai Hu hesitated for a moment before asking, "Aren't you worried about that little butcher?" Li Shan was afraid of the cold. Even during the summer, the cool breeze still blew in the tide-listening pavilion on Mount Qingliang. He hurriedly picked up the wine gourd and drank a mouthful to warm his stomach. Then he sighed and said, "Su Xiao doesn't seem to be afraid, but I'm very afraid. Even an outsider like Mr. Nangong can see it. How can His Royal Highness and Chen Jibao, who are in confrontation with the authorities, not know? When I think of how Chen Jibao dragged Wu Xingyi Baikui's wife and daughter to death in front of the Western Wall, I can't help but be afraid. Perhaps you don't know, Chen Jibao's swordsmanship isn't bad. His most outstanding skill is his spear. Compared to spear immortal Wang Xiu, his master, he's on par with him. Chen Jibao's art of war has always been to succeed in 1 strike. Presumably, it's nothing more than this. Many things in the world are beyond one's control. Back then, didn't Zhao Guangling and I hint to our confidants that Su Xiao might as well rebel? Although Su Xiao can endure it, only God knows if Chen Jibao can. That person in the capital has spent a lot of time and effort on this for the past 10 years. To be honest, Mr. Nangong, it's not that Li Yuanying cherishes his life. It's just that I'm afraid the building will collapse. I'm sorry for the princess in white who plays the drum." Bai Hu Er's face seemed to be affected by Li Shan's invisible murderous aura. Her mood was somewhat heavy. Li Shan exhaled deeply. He raised his head and drank a mouthful of wine. He laughed and said, "Today, I came downstairs to tell Mr. Nangong these words from the bottom of my heart. I hope that Mr. Nangong will remember this faint friendship when you come out of the tide-listening pavilion. Fengnian's cleverness was carefully taught by me, a dying man. Mr. Nangong, please don't be angry at this guy's slyness. Since Fengnian's temperament is similar to that of the princess, he is naturally not bad." Bai Hu Er's face only nodded. Li Shan, however, knew that it was enough. The man who had seen countless battles with his own eyes said in a trance, "It's a time of peace now." Not to mention the common people, even some young generals can't imagine the magnificence of hundreds of thousands of soldiers fighting a fierce battle. Such a scene, although covered in bones, can still inspire countless men to advance dauntlessly. Beiliang is a good place. Horses galloping from the north are arrogant, and songs from the south are all dead. Although they are worried about the fall of the country, they are not mourning. I just don't know if I can see Fengnian leading an army and trampling the 13 provinces of Beimang in my life. The wind, the rain, the thunder, and the river are still incomparable to the hooves of the horses in Beiliang. Li Shan turned and left the outer corridor with a smile. Bai Hu Er's face looked at the skinny back with mixed feelings. Bai Hu Er's face looked into the distance again and frowned. He seemed to be regretting that he did not agree to leave Liangzhou together. He was annoyed by this unprecedented emotion. He snorted and forced himself to suppress it. After calming down, Bai Hu Er's face narrowed, his peach blossom eyes that were more beautiful than Su Fengnian's. He looked in the direction of the eastern sea and gritted his teeth. The second in the world. Chapter 231. Only one chapter for today. Hearing that the old god of swords was going to impart the two-sleeved green snake, Su Fengnian was shocked beyond words. Without waiting for him to react, Li Chungang coldly snorted and said, "Lend me the sword." The spring thunder at Su Fengnian's waist trembled incessantly. He subconsciously wanted to press down on the simple and unadorned short knife to prevent it from leaving its scabbard. The old man wearing the sheepskin fur coat sneered and said, "I'll let you experience the Wu family's sword Mound's imperial sword ascending Mount Kunlun." How could Su Fengnian defeat the old god of swords who had been in seclusion under the tide-listening pavilion for so many years? The spring thunder was still guided by the old god of swords' finger and leaped into the air. Li Chungang pressed down with his finger and the spring thunder descended. With a twist of his finger, the spring thunder spun rapidly in front of him and finally formed a circle of bright knife shadows without a blade. The old god of swords allowed the spring thunder to spin in circles in the air. He reached out and grabbed the handle of the knife. Two streaks of green gang instantly exploded from the simple spring thunder blade like two mysterious green snakes. The old god of swords did not remind Su Fengnian to be careful. Using the knife as a sword, the sword aura was imposing and he chopped down at Su Fengnian, who was pondering the imperial sword school. The sword aura roamed and instantly shot towards Su Fengnian's face. Last time on Mount Wudong, Su Fengnian fought against an imperial bodyguard of the Dongyue imperial family. That bladesman used a pair of wild brocade knives. What Su Fengnian valued and envied the most was that person's unique drawing knife technique. Seeing the green snake surging toward him, Su Fengnian did not know how to understand that mysterious meaning. Since the green snake sword aura was unavoidable, Su Fengnian drew his knife out of its scabbard in a flash. With one breath, he raised his knife to block the cold sword aura. Standing at the top of the slope, Su Fengnian was pushed to the waist of the slope by the two intertwined green snakes. Dust flew up from the ground. His Royal Highness sleeves and shoes were all destroyed. However, the old man with the sheepskin coat took advantage of his position to bully Su Fengnian. One sword after another, the sword aura grew stronger and the green gang became denser. Su Fengnian did not even have time to catch his breath. Fortunately, the fourth floor of the grand yellow courtyard allowed two chis to produce green lotuses. Together with the green snake out of the hole, he was forced to retreat from the waist of the mountain to the foot of the slope. The old god of swords narrowed his eyes as he stood at the top of the slope. He asked, "Your drawing of the blade is a small trick. If this old man is not wrong, this is the famous technique of the East Yu imperial family. It has never been written down in a secret manual and is only passed down by word of mouth. How did you learn it, kid?" The chi in Su Fengnian's body was surging like a tidal wave. His grand yellow courtyard had just stabilized, so he immediately felt extremely uncomfortable. He said bitterly, "I once saw a member of the East Yu imperial family use drawing of the blade once. You can say that I learned it secretly." The old god of swords nodded and did not think much of it. He only smiled and asked, "Have you rested enough?" Su Fengnian made a prompt decision and said resolutely and decisively, "Not yet." The old god of swords was not a kind person. He laughed and the green snake in his hand rose again with an even more ferocious momentum. It was not that Su Fengnian did not want to avoid the sharp edge, but that he could not escape at all. He could only use the most clumsy method to meet force with force. Fortunately, Li Chungang seemed to be holding back on purpose. Every time he attacked, he was not ruthless. Compared to the 200-300 Zhonglong sword forces on the official road, his aura was more like a soft knife cutting flesh. He probably wanted to see how many green lotuses the grand yellow courtyard could produce. Su Fengnian gritted his teeth and sank his feet into the mud. He used the sword move covering armor imparted to him by his aunt to resist the green snake sword force. Unfortunately, the old god of swords' sword aura was so powerful that Xiao Dong could not bend any further under the pressure of layers of sword aura. With a bang, Su Fengnian and Xiao Dong flew backward. They tumbled a few times before they got up and another green snake slithered over. Su Fengnian risked his life to change to the sword move from the flying sword of Dunhuang to fight the enemy. When he was sent flying again, his mind was in a daze and he had a glimmer of understanding. The superior way of the sword was divided into the control of the sword and the creation of the aura. It gave up the sword will and sought the sword moves. Therefore, the sword tomb of the Wu family was the best. However, there was a flaw. The more profound a swordsman's cultivation was, the more he needed a divine weapon. For example, when Wu Luding left the tomb, he brought the Su of Gojosian with him. As for the latter, the long sword itself was only a support. The aura of the sword was the way of the king. For example, when Li Chungang used the umbrella and the water droplets as his sword, he could already predict that everything in the world could be used as a sword. However, when he truly faced the green snake with two sleeves, Su Fengnian realized that the reason why Li Chungang was able to reach the peak of the way of the sword was because of the old god of swords' control of the sword and the creation of the aura of the sword. The green snake slithered in a seemingly straight line, but in reality, it could freely change its direction under the guidance of the qi. It was because of the exquisite control of the aura that it could create such a grand scene. The old god of swords held the spring thunder in his hand and slowly walked down the hill. "Kid, you're not dead yet." Su Fengnian's ferocity was aroused. He pretended to be fat and laughed, "Not yet." Again. Li Chungang dismissed it with a laugh and said softly, "The small injustice in the chest can be dispelled with wine. The great injustice in the world can only be dispelled with the sword. Kid Su, be it this old man's wooden horse ox, or the Su of Gojosian that is now in Wu Liuding's hands, or the great Liang dragon sparrow that your mother used in the past, if you don't dare to think about leveling the world with one sword, how can you reach the realm of earth immortals if you don't even dare to think about it? When you get used to this old man's two sleeves green snake, you will naturally have your own spirit. Only then will the great yellow court be your great yellow court. When facing an enemy, you can't retreat before the battle. This principle that this old man taught you tonight is not inferior to the two sleeves green snake." Over at the two bonfires, only sword aura could be seen soaring into the sky near the hillside. Ning Ame was a little worried and wanted to lead a pair of white horses to keep an eye on it. However, he was stopped by the old Taoist priest Wei Shuyang with a smile. Ning Ame, who was slightly further away from the bonfire, asked Elder Mi in a low voice, "Jinren, is that old senior the old god of swords Li?" The old Taoist priest, who was close to 70 years old, had a look of longing on his face. He seemed to remember the frivolous days when he imitated Li Qingdan and roamed the Jianghu. He stroked his beard and laughed, "Yes, it is the old god of swords. Now that I think about it, it is indeed like a dream. I didn't dare to imagine that I would be able to travel with this old senior in this life. How fortunate." Ning Ame had always been a shy and introverted person with a good temper in private. He smiled, as if he didn't know how to continue the topic. To him, Li Chungang was just a first-rate immortal on land that the older generation of Jianghu martial artists talked about. He was nothing more than a 100-year-old child with the face of a baby, who could travel 100 miles in an instant, and whose swordsmanship could look down on the world. Now that he had actually met him, he was somewhat unprepared. The old man's eating and sitting posture were really unconventional. Especially when the old senior's sword, the wooden horse and ox, was broken by Wang Xianji of the martial emperor city. In addition, for some reason, he only had one arm left. He really couldn't help but sigh. To Ning Ame, he had personally witnessed the green snake's sword aura being so irresistible. If he had both arms, what would it be like? However, how could one sleeves two green snakes? Wei Shuyang seemed to have seen through Ning Ame's thoughts. He shook his head and said, "General Ning, it's not that simple. Ningame didn't say anything. He then turned his head and saw His Royal Highness, who had changed into a new set of clothes at dusk, walking over in ragged clothes. The old God of Swords was leisurely following behind with a faint smile on his face. Su Fengnian saw that there was still some distance between them and the bonfire. He smiled bitterly and said, "Old senior, you said you were going to teach me the green snake with 2 sleeves, but how could you teach me the way? From the beginning to the end, I was beaten up and couldn't even escape." Old Manly blew his beard and glared at him. He said, "Idiot, what's the point of telling you all those principles? This old man's famous unique skill isn't that easy to learn." Su Fengnian muttered, "I'm just lazy and don't feel like talking." The old God of Swords laughed instead of getting angry. He chuckled and said, "That's true. The green snake with 2 sleeves is called 2 sleeves. Not to mention the sword intent, there are already 66 sword moves. If I were to explain them to you one by one, this old man would have to waste a lot of time and energy." Su Fengnian put on a pitiful expression that said, "I knew it." The old man laughed coldly and said, "Kid, don't complain that you're fat or thin after taking advantage of a lady. Take your time. When you can really break the green snake with 1 slash, you'll be considered to have reached a higher level in martial arts." Su Fengnian asked with a bitter face, "Old senior, do you mean to say that I'm going to be beaten up every day?" Li Chungang glanced at him and said, "Or else." Su Fengnian immediately smiled flatteringly and said, "This is my great fortune. People in the world can't get this even if they burn incense and pray to Buddha." Li Chungang stared at His Royal Highness's face with a strange expression. Then, he kicked Su Fengnian's buttocks and looked at his staggering back. He laughed and said, "Kid, you really look like a dog. How are your skills in bed? Why don't you get lost and practice with that Princess Jingyan?" Chapter 232. Su Fengnian, who had just been kicked, asked in confusion, "Practice?" The old God of Swords sneered, "Otherwise, do you think you can use real swords and spears to train that Princess Jingyan? Are you willing to part with the Great Yellow Court?" Even someone as thick-skinned as Su Fengnian was still somewhat embarrassed, so he didn't continue to harp on this topic. He walked closer to the bonfire and sat down beside Yu Yue. Ningame walked over with one hand carrying some golden roasted meat, which dripped with oil. He handed one to His Royal Highness and one to the old God of Swords. The famished Su Fengnian tore into the meat and joked, "General Ning, let's sit down together. Let's bask in the old God of Swords' immortal aura." Ningame, who had removed his armor but was still carrying the short halberd on his back, sat down with a bashful smile on his face. This general of martial arts had a fierce appearance, but his voice and personality were the complete opposite. Su Fengnian looked at General Ning, who was eating elegantly, and laughed out loud for no reason. Everyone around the bonfire looked at each other. Su Fengnian asked Ningame in a soft voice, "When fighting on the battlefield, some great generals and fierce men like to shout things like, 'Give me your life, thief,' or 'I'll take your dog's head.' General Ning, what should we do with your soft voice? I've been curious about this for some time now." Ningame's rough face reflected the light of the fire, so it was hard to tell if he was blushing. He scratched his head and laughed, "When I first became a colonel, I also wanted to learn from those brave and skillful seniors in the art of war and shout in front of the battlefield. Later on, I fought side by side with the great general and was the vanguard general to break through the enemy lines. As soon as I shouted something, the great general stopped me and scolded me harshly. He said, 'If you want to use a halberd, then use a halberd. What nonsense are you talking about?' Moreover, it was like a woman burping. The great general scolded me and told me not to embarrass the Bailiang army. After that, I didn't dare to shout in front of the battlefield anymore. If you want to kill, then kill. Just kill." "I knew you would be scolded badly by Su Shao." Su Fengnian held his belly and laughed. His ragged appearance was no better than the beggar he had been 3 years ago. As he laughed, he swung the barbecued meat in his hand. Princess Jing-en, who was not far away, looked a little absent-minded. Needless to say, King of Jing'an, Xiao Heng, had always been high above the masses, spotless and sanctimonious. Even heir apparent, Xiao Sun, had always had a crafty style of not getting tired of eating good things and not getting tired of delicacies. From the large decorations in his room to the small jade pendant on his waist, all of them were treasures and had absolutely no fate with the word tacky. Su Fingnian glanced at Princess Pei and then smiled at Li Chungang, who was wolfing down the food. Old senior, how is General Ning's halberd skills? Can it be said to be at the point of perfection? Hearing this, Ning Amei immediately became restless. As expected, the sharp-tongued old man with the sheepskin fur coat spat out a piece of bone and laughed. Point of perfection. That empty-handed Wang Mingyin who stole the halberd should have already transcended mortality and become a saint. Why is he only ranked 11th in the world? You rascal, if you want this old man to teach this fellow halberd skills, just say it. Don't try to trick me. Su Fingnian smiled and said, Old senior, please do not hesitate to teach me. The old god of swords said impatiently, we'll talk about it when you're in the mood. Su Fingnian saw that Ning Amei, the big halberd, was only immersed in shock and surprise. He quietly stretched out his leg and kicked him. The latter's body trembled and he cupped his fists and said, Ning Amei thanks the old god of swords. Old Manly glared and said, What old god of swords? Did you recognize Dong Tai as the new god of swords? As long as I haven't fought with this junior, this old man is still the god of swords of the Jianghu for the past 100 years. Ning Amei was terrified. How could he understand Li Chuangong's temperament? He could only look at His Royal Highness for help. Su Fingnian waved his hand and signaled Ning Amei to leave first. Just as he was about to smooth things over, he inadvertently saw the little mud man holding a book and wiping her tears. Her slender shoulders trembled. He stretched his head and vaguely saw the title of the book. He laughed involuntarily. It was Wang Chudong's The First Snow, but he did not know which volume she was at. Su Fingnian sat over and gently snatched the book. He glanced at it and looked at the pages. Jiang and I was already at the end. She was probably feeling sad because of the line, May all lovers in the world be together. Without waiting for the little mud man to fly into a rage, he tactfully returned the book to her and teased, It's all a fictional story. You can even cry after reading it. Countless infatuated men and women in the world have shed tens of thousands of caddies of tears for this book. You're nothing more. Jiang and I held the book, The First Snow, tightly with tears in her eyes. Choking with sobs, she scolded, Do you think everyone has a heart of stone like you? Li Chungang joined in the fun and said, This old man had time to take a few glances. The love in the book is still okay, but this Wang Dongxiang's poem is really good. It follows the sages of the past and has a deep understanding of the essence of poetry. However, there are a few pieces that are not up to standard. I don't know who he learned this bad habit from, but there are large sections that are copied from the three mysteries of Lao Zhuang and Yi. Especially some of the rare words peeled from the Buddhist scriptures. If this old man were to comment, he would be suffering from a Zen disease. However, after the Spring and Autumn War, hundreds of thousands of scholars fled Zen. Therefore, it can't be said that this Wang Dongxiang is not talented enough. He is just following the trend of the times. Suddenly, Su Fengnian and the old man tacitly stared at each other, making the people around them look at each other in dismay. These two fellows had strange smiles on their faces at the same time, but Li Chuangong's smile had a hint of regret. Both of them sighed at the same time. Even Jiang and I could not help but tidy up her emotions. She curiously muttered, What happened to these two fellows? Naturally, she did not know that the old god of swords' nickname, Li Qingdan, came from a poem that was gifted to him by a lady from a noble family. That lady was no different from Wang Dongxiang. At that time, she was also a prodigy like a poet in the scholarly and literary world. However, the most brilliant poems in her life were all written for Li Chungang, whom she admired. Unfortunately, Li Chungang's heart was undistracted. He was deeply in love with the way of the sword. When he was young, he did not care about love at all. Many women were sad because of this and could not rest in peace until they died. In this matter, how similar were Su Fengnian and Li Chungang. Chapter 233. The Sutra Pavilion of the two Zen temples contained countless classics. It was made up of 16 floors, but there were still many books that could not be stored. Although it was not a forbidden area, there was no place to burn incense. Pilgrims did not dare to walk around in this sacred land of Buddhism. Therefore, there were very few people in this area. Only a few monks came and went in a hurry, either to borrow books or to return books. Therefore, the group of three was particularly eye-catching today. A woman who looked like a young woman was holding the ear of a young monk who was wearing a special monk robe. The young woman was nagging non-stop. The poor young monk was being held by the ear and scolded. When he saw the monks of the temple, he still had to bow and greet them politely. Among the monks, there was no lack of eminent monks of the Hui generation. They were all in their 60s. When they saw this young monk who often taught them, they would also respectfully put their palms together and salute. However, when the old monks saw this scene, they all looked down, as if they did not see anything. As for the younger monks of the temple, the more timid ones would blush and grin at the young woman and the girl behind the monk. The more courageous ones would stop and follow a few steps, calling her mistress. Most of them would try to worm their way into being friends with the girl of the same age. Unfortunately, the girl ignored them and was annoyed. She glared angrily and said, "Go away, who are you gathering so many bald heads to light up the lanterns for in broad daylight?" The young monks laughed and dispersed, not forgetting to sneak a few glances at the girl. The young woman who had been holding the young monk's ear said angrily, "Nanbei, you're really loyal. If I didn't ask my daughter to do it, how long would it take for you to give up your master? Tell me, why is your master hiding in the Sutra Pavilion? Which vixen at the foot of the mountain did he receive a love letter from this time?" The young monk who had no choice but to tiptoe said with a bitter face, "Mistress, I really didn't. Master is really studying the Buddhist scriptures. In the past few years, whenever the great abbot handed me a letter, I would quickly take the initiative to hand it over to mistress." The young woman laughed and said, "Bullsh *t. When was it not intercepted by something first? You two little brats peeking at it. What's there to see? Isn't it just a roundabout way of expressing admiration, adoration, and yearning? These women don't even know how to be shy. They're actually flirting with a monk." These three were, of course, Miss East-West, the little monk Zun Nanbei, and the famous tigress of the two Zen temples. "Mother, you even married a monk. Mother, you're married to a monk." The young woman was very amiable towards her daughter. She increased the strength she used to twist her daughter's ear. She turned her head and said softly, "Daughter, how can this be the same? If I don't go to hell, who will? It's enough for your father to harm one woman." Stupid North and South hurriedly expressed their loyalty and said, "Mistress is kind and virtuous." The young woman did not loosen her grip after listening to his flattery. Instead, she tightened her grip and snorted, "You're becoming more and more slippery like your master. You've gone down the mountain twice and now you know how to change your mind according to the wind. How could this be? Daughter, be careful in the future." The small monk wanted to cry but had no tears. It was over. He would probably have to eat half a bowl of rice for every meal for the next half a month. Sigh, forget it. I'll just use the copper coins I saved to buy some nice clothes for East-West. When they arrived in front of a sutra building, the young woman finally let go of the small monk. She shouted angrily, not losing to the Buddhist lion's roar, "Li Xiaoxin. The small monk said timidly, "Mistress, Master said that monks don't talk about their names, nor do they talk about their longevity." The young woman ignored him and East-West said unhappily, "Shut up." As soon as the young woman finished shouting, a white-robed monk rushed out of the lofty pavilion with a swoosh. He came to the front of the young woman and said with a smile, "Wife, are you tired from walking? Can you give me a massage?" If an outsider was present, they would think that this woman had been rude and unreasonable along the way and would definitely teach the white-robed monk a lesson. However, when she saw her man, she said softly, "I'm not tired. It's just that I haven't seen you for a few days and I miss you a little." The white-robed monk, whose real name was Li Xiaoxin, smiled intoxicatingly and did not speak. Since she was here, there was no zen in the world. The East-West girl shook her head and walked away like an old man. The small monk, Nan Bei, followed behind her and asked softly, "Going to play chess?" The young woman, who was thinking about which abbot to ask for fruits to satisfy her cravings, frowned and said, "Aren't you going to teach some old monks with the surname Escher?" The small monk looked at the hot weather and the hair on East-West's temples sticking tightly to her cheeks. He felt a little distressed and said, "There's still 2 hours left. Do you want to find a place to cool off?" East-West said absent-mindedly, "Why hasn't Su Fingnian come to our temple to play?" The small monk smiled brightly, revealing his white teeth. He volunteered, "Why don't I tell Master to let me go down the mountain to find Su Fingnian? Can I show him the way?" East-West did not speak. She just turned to look at this stupid Nan Bei. Alas, a few years ago this stupid Nan Bei was half a head shorter than her. How did he suddenly grow so much taller? She walked to a cool corridor under the eaves of a sutra pavilion and sat on the railing. She held her chin and said, "Nan Bei, you're so stupid. If I'm not by your side in the future, what will you do?" Nan Bei had always been scolded as stupid by this family of 3. In fact, he was the one taking care of these 3 lazy guys. However, he was seriously thinking about this problem. His expression was even more serious than when the old monks in the temple asked him about the ambiguity of Buddhist scriptures. He seemed to have finally figured it out and smiled, "It's okay. As long as you're happy. Look at Master and his wife, they're so loving. You'll definitely be like them in the future. Don't worry, East-West, monks don't lie. I'm a man of my words. In the future, I'll definitely give you a box of the best and most expensive rouge. As for the sarira, I can probably afford it." East-West turned around and slapped the small monk's bald head. "Are you really going to burn the sarira after becoming Buddha? Aren't you stupid?" Nan Bei smiled foolishly. He was quite stupid. Chapter 234. Inside the carriage, Su Fingnian and Princess Pei's chess game was a bit messy. Princess Pei's chess skills were originally on par with His Royal Highness's, but today, she had easily won 2 games in a row. She couldn't help but raise her head to look at his expressionless face. She wondered if it was because he was afraid of returning home. Was it because of the big sister, Su Jihu, who had stirred up a storm of criticism and even shook the capital university? Princess Jing and could be considered to be born into a wealthy family. She was used to the internal strife between brothers. There were very few families that were truly harmonious. Princess Pei had only heard rumors about the most famous widow in Gangnam-do. Not long ago, she had been slapped in the face by a woman from the neighboring Jiangxin County. This talented woman had created a saying that Su Jihu was a broken incense burner. The incense burner was porous and was a metaphor for a slut. This saying had never appeared in any books. When the scholars of the 2 counties came back to their senses, they all slapped the table in praise. For a time, the saying of Su Jihu's incense burner in Gangnam-do became more and more popular. This was especially true for the noble ladies and young ladies of Gangnam-do who had always hated Su Jihu. They would talk about the incense burner every 3 sentences, which made them feel indescribably comfortable and satisfied. After Su Fengnian conceded, he didn't propose a rematch this time. Instead, he left the carriage and jumped onto a snow-white famous horse from the western regions. This fine horse was once the king of the wild horses on the border of Beiliang. It was undoubtedly the most outstanding heavy horse in the world. His Royal Highness said to the Lieutenant Yuan Meng, who was slowly riding behind him, "Tell General Ning that we will enter the city together." Yuan Meng's expression changed, and he secretly grinned. Under normal circumstances, the Beiliang battalion would maintain a distance of 1 li. Today, since His Royal Highness wanted to take a stance, he was naturally happy. As the leader of the 100 White Horse loyal followers, although he didn't insult the Beiliang army by fighting to the death in the Battle of the Reed Marshes in Qingzhou, His Royal Highness had shown such bravery. The Phoenix Battalion had only suffered heavy casualties and couldn't help much. It was always suspicious that they were of little help to the overall situation. During this period of time, Yuan Meng had been unhappy and wanted to vent his anger. Wasn't the opportunity now? Yuan Meng turned his horse around and quickly galloped away. He saw Ningame, whose arm had healed and was once again holding his halberd, and said in a deep voice, "General Ning, His Royal Highness has ordered that we enter the city together." Ningame, who was wearing heavy black armor, nodded. He pulled down his helmet and looked extraordinarily stern. He pointed his halberd at Yangchun City and suddenly squeezed the horse's belly. He led the Phoenix Battalion light cavalry to speed up and gallop forward. Dust flew everywhere. All the carriages and pedestrians on the official road heard the sound of the heavy cavalry and moved to the side with pale faces. They let the group of light cavalry pass by. Su Fengnian didn't stop at all in Xiongbao County. He galloped his horse and arrived 2 days earlier than expected at Yangchun City, which was known as the heart of the world. This city's earth veins were most suitable for the growth of peonies. Therefore, Wei Ziyao and Huang Chuchen were among the top 3 of the dynasty's top 10 peonies. Su Fengnian looked at the city walls that were getting taller and taller as they approached. He didn't say a word. The guards at the city gate and the merchants and commoners who were using the road to enter the city all looked at this white-robed young master. Good heavens, this horse was extraordinary. Was it a heavenly horse? Even the officials of Yangchun City didn't have such a mount, right? The experienced and knowledgeable guards had better eyesight than ordinary people. Just this horse alone was more imposing than those generals. If there was no mistake, this young master should be one of the top aristocratic families in Yangzhou. When they asked for the road pass according to the rules, they had to smile. If this young master was a generous person, it would be even better if he gave them some money as a reward. However, when the guards heard the thundering sound of cavalry and saw a group of unfamiliar riders with unknown banners charging toward them, their expressions immediately became serious. One of them hurriedly went to inform the city gate captain, while the others berated the common people to temporarily stop entering and leaving the city gate. The 6 or 7 city gate guards and other miscellaneous people all dodged to the foot of the city wall on both sides. Only then did they feel compelled by their duties to block the road with their spears, trembling with fear. Among them, a burly man from the Jiangnan Dao had the right to carry a saber. He took 2 steps forward. Under the scorching sun, he swallowed his saliva, moistening his dry throat that had been tossed around by the heavens. Just as he was about to shout, a halberd general among the cavalry, who was dressed very differently from the Yangzhou soldiers, rushed to the city gate. He placed his 80-gene halberd on the captain's shoulder. Without exerting much force, the captain, whose figure could not be considered weak, staggered. This foreign general, who was wearing black armor and riding a black horse, was like a killing god. He coldly said, "Get out of the way." The 2 trembling captains said in a trembling voice, "General, foreign troops entering the city need to show the tiger seal and the official document from the Ministry of War." Originally, there were only less than 10 generals in the Liang dynasty who had made meritorious contributions. Other than the 6 fixed military officer titles of Long Xiang, Piao Qi, and Fu Guo, they were all second class. The rest of the generals who could be called general were even rarer. For example, Su Xiao, who had just been stripped of his title as the pillar of the state, and Gu Jiantang, a famous general in the spring and autumn period who had been given the title of pillar of the state. However, outside of Beiliang, as long as one was a military officer above the 7th class, they would be happy to be called general by their subordinates in private. However, in public, it was easy to cause trouble if one openly called a general who did not have an official title. It could be seen that this small soldier from Hutting County was really afraid of this majestic general of unknown origin. Damn, how could he not be afraid? This guy was holding a halberd. The dynasty claimed that there were millions of soldiers who dared to use a halberd. How many people dared to use a halberd? Su Fingnian raised his head and glanced at the 3 words Yangchun City written in seal script on the city wall. He pursed his lips and rushed in. Chapter 235. The officer at the gate, who had just drunk half a jug of wine under the shade of a tree in the inner city, hurriedly ran over. Seeing this troublesome situation, his drunkenness completely dissipated. There was no need to think about forcefully stopping them. He only wanted to delay as much time as possible. When the government received the news, there would be no need for him to be stuck in the middle. He was just about to speak when an object flew through the air. It was like a rainbow piercing through the sun. It stabbed into the stone floor in front of him with a loud bang. It was an extremely rare jet-black halberd in the army. If he took one more step forward, this halberd would pierce a large hole in his body. He was so scared that he stood there like a wooden chicken. In the time he was stunned, the young master in white robes on a white horse had already passed through the gate. Then, 2 carriages followed closely behind. The general in black armor rode slowly on his horse. When he passed by the officer, he pulled out his halberd. The light cavalry passed through the gate. More than 100 cold and beautiful standard knives were unsheathed. They shone dazzlingly through the gate. No one dared to move. It was not until the cavalry troop that trespassed the city gate of Yangchun City disappeared that everyone, who did not dare to breathe loudly, finally felt relieved. The common people near the city gate, who had their eyes opened, discussed animatedly, guessing which family's young master in their province would act so domineeringly. Since ancient times, Yangzhou had produced wealthy families. If it wasn't for the unjust war of the spring and autumn period that suppressed the limelight of Yangzhou's Jiangzhou group, the Green Party of Qingzhou, who had achieved success in recent years, would be nothing. In Gangnam-do, there was the Xiangzhou song of the previous dynasty, the Hutting Lu family of the 4th generation of the 3 dukes of the 4th generation, the Boi Yuan family of the 4th generation, and the Gumu Su family of the 4th generation were all first-class families. After the country war led to the tragedy of 9 out of 10 families, these 4 families began to hide their strength and bide their time. However, Yangzhou, which was named after its great state, was far from what Qingzhou could compare to. Last year, there was a governor's son in Qingzhou who wanted to marry a crippled woman from the Yu family as his wife. He was rejected. The Yu family said that the governor's family was a poor family that didn't enter the ranks. If they married, what was the difference between them marrying animals? However, the county governor of Qing province, who had bitterly studied for a smooth career and became a high-ranking official of a region, was only resentful and did not refute this insult. The citizens of Yangchun City counted with their fingers for a long time, but they could not guess who this young master was. They had never heard of such a rude young master among the 4 major families of Gangnam-do. After entering the city, Shu Xiu urged her horse to catch up with His Royal Highness and said carefully, "Your Highness," Senior Li said he was hungry and wanted to eat something at the restaurant in front. Su Fingnian frowned and nodded. "All right. Shu Xiu, ask for the way to the Lu residence later." His Royal Highness and company dismounted and entered the restaurant, while the Phoenix Battalion stopped their horses by the roadside. The waiter of the restaurant was alert, so he quickly ran out of the restaurant to greet this group of distinguished guests. After being brought to the second floor to take a seat, the business here was booming and the place was packed to the brim. He saw that the customers were divided into two groups. Those near the windows were craning their necks to look at the elite cavalry in the bustling city, while those further away from the windows were pricking up their ears to listen to the comments of the customers near the windows. Su Fengnian, the elderly god of swords, and the others had just sat down and asked the waiter to prepare some of the restaurant's signature dishes when they heard some whispers. There were two granaries in the world. The desolate northern Liang was the horse granary, while the Jiangnan Dao was the granary of the world, where the richest people in the world were the richest. In the last 100 years, the many commanderies of the Jiangnan Dao had produced a large number of scholars. Thus, the air of eloquence and the air of an advisor were extremely strong. In the eyes of the scholars of the Jiangnan Dao, there was nothing that they could not criticize and nothing that they could not comment on. Of the 30,000 students of the Imperial College in the capital, the ones who liked to point out the state the most were mostly from the Jiangnan Dao. Su Fengnian was expressionless as he waited for the dishes to be served. Xu Xiu had already asked for the location of the Lu residence in the lake pavilion. She bowed beside him and reported the details respectfully. Xu Xiu was a naturally beautiful and charming woman. She was the type of seductress that men would think of in bed with just a glance. Especially now that she was bending over, the view in front of her chest was very aggressive, like a pair of inverted bamboo shoots that were about to burst out of her clothes. In addition to Xu Xiu, Su Fengnian also had Yu Wei, who was holding a white cat, and Princess Jing Han, whose face was covered by a veil but had a graceful figure. Such a feast for the eyes was rare in the world, and it made the diners on the second floor drool. They immediately had a strong desire to show off, as if they had taken an aphrodisiac. The voices on the second floor were much louder, as they only wanted to be remembered by these rare beauties. Not to mention getting intimate with them, just a few glances from them would be enough to make them ecstatic. Gangnam-do, which was full of noble families and nobles, had always advocated talkative and mysterious talks. The scholars and doctors all wore loose robes and wide belts, feather fans and silk headscarves, and wore crane robes. The air was very fragrant, and they did not even look at riding horses. They had to drive ox carts to show their status. Even the page boys had to pick those pale youths with red lips and white teeth. There were only a few young maidservants who were familiar with playing the zither and brewing tea, and they were too embarrassed to go out and greet their friends. The second floor was full of loud conversations, and it was very lively. I heard that in a few days, Belyang's empty-bellied heir will come to our Hutting County to visit his eldest sister. This pair of siblings, one is ignorant and incompetent, the other is shameless. They really are a good match. If this widow's conduct wasn't improper, how could she have been scolded by Sir Qingjai's wife to be a two-legged incense burner? This saying is really too wonderful for words. That slap in the face was really good. I heard from some people at Baogua Temple that after this unrestrained widow was slapped, she still laughed. She really is a woman from Beiliang. You should lower your voice a bit. I heard that the empress who wrote the Precepts for Women wanted to support her niece, but after the one from Beiliang went to the capital, this empress ceased all activity. There's even news that she went to Changchun Palace. Humph, this world really makes me, a scholar, bitterly disappointed. No matter how much that boorish fellow covers the sky with one hand, how can he extend his hand to Gangnam-do? Wouldn't Grand Secretary Zhang chop off his claws? That's true. Grand Secretary Sir is indeed amazing, a role model for all scholars under the heavens. Sir Qingjai is a bit muddle-headed, but he doesn't neglect the greater good. Read that poem about breaking off ties, we should make a toast. These words aren't wrong, we should indeed make a toast. Come, let's drink. One of the people on the second floor suddenly stood up, arriving at the table where the discussion was the most heated. He drew his blade and hacked the table in half, calmly saying, "You want to drink, right? Today, I'll let you drink piss until you're full." Chapter 236. The middle-aged swordsman in green was about to make a move when his expression changed drastically. Without caring about etiquette, he grabbed his master's arm and hurriedly flew backward. They crashed through the wooden wall on the second floor and landed on the street. The young master asked gloomily, "Wang Meng, why are you doing this?" The swordsman replied as if he was facing a great enemy. Someone downstairs used chopsticks as swords and threw them. His sword intent has reached the first-grade realm. After the swordsman led him a few times into the alleyway, the young master elegantly folded his fan and patted the dust off his body. He smiled and said, "Little sunny spring city, there's such an expert? No wonder that guy with 2 sabers dared to be so impudent. Wang Meng, what grade is the expert downstairs at?" The swordsman's expression turned ugly as he said, "Perhaps higher than the Vajra realm. He already has some hints of the finger Xian realm." Only then did the young master's expression turn serious. He snorted coldly and walked into the alleyway. After hesitating for a moment, he threw away the precious folding fan carved from ivory that was worth at least 1,000 taels of silver and said, "You dirted my fan. This debt must be properly settled. So what if you have a first-grade expert to rely on? I don't believe you can walk out of Yangzhou alive." Lu residence. Lu Xianlang, the clan brother of the current head of the Lu family, Lu Daolin, was sitting in the study with a gloomy expression. One of the female servants was standing and massaging his shoulders while the other was kneeling and massaging his legs. The weight of the massages was just right. The 2 beautiful female servants were actually a pair of twin lotuses on a stalk. Individually, the 2 sisters were already bright and moving. When they were together, they were even more alluring. Lu Xianlang was a famous talker in Yangzhou. The Lu family had a total of 6 people in their generation. Compared to the other large families of the same rank in Yangzhou, they were not very luxuriant. However, the Lu family could be said to have produced many talents. When the previous emperor toured Jiangnan, he had personally praised them. It was clear that the Lu family was a shining jewel. With one word from the emperor, the Lu family was established as the leader of Yangzhou. The head of the family, Lu Daolin, was now the right chancellor of the capital's imperial college. Lu Xianlang oversaw Yangzhou, where the family's foundation was. Back then, he had a battle of words with the scholars at the White Horse Temple and convinced them. Then, he had a private visit to Jiangnan province with the old Grand Secretary on whether the 6 classics were history. The debate continued until the middle of the night. The debater who had confronted Lu Xianlang had not yet made a name for himself. Looking at it now, it was simply terrifying. Other than Huan Shu, who was now the left chancellor of the Imperial College, there was also the current Grand Secretary Zhang Julu. Lu Xuanlang's loftiness in the past could be seen. Now that he was old, although he could no longer do the open-minded behavior of spreading nudity and drinking wine in seclusion, he was still a half-saint scholar praised by everyone in Gangnam-do. However, what Lu Xianlang hated the most in his life was that he had married that widow. Not only had he caused the death of the son the family had placed high hopes on, he had also brought countless humiliation to the Lu family. In recent times, he had written letters to his brother, who had disregarded all opposition and strived to bring that wanton widow into the family, full of resentment and complaints. However, his brother was stubborn and refused to drive that woman out of the Lu family. Of the 4 major families in Yangzhou, the ranking was now Jiang Xinchuan, Bo Li Yuan, Hu Ting Lu, and Gu Mu Su. Originally, with the Lu family's wealth and power, they were firmly ranked second. However, it was because of this wanton woman, who he had never treated as his daughter-in-law, that the Bo Li Yuan family's reputation overtook. Now, the crown prince of Beiliang was coming to Yangzhou. Lu Xuanlang's resentment was mixed with the bitterness that was difficult to tell to others. How could the wife of the young man from Jiangxin County, Lu Lighting, have the ability to disturb the imperial concubine who wrote the admonition for women in the palace? There was an arrangement that he did not know. His original intention was to endure the pain and remove the black sheep from the family. He could no longer allow her to stir up trouble and ruin the reputation that the Liu family had painstakingly accumulated for dozens of generations. However, he did not expect that before the imperial concubine in the palace could do anything, he received shocking news that the imperial concubine had been banished to the Changchun palace by His Majesty and was completely banished into the cold palace. Liu Xianlang, who was holding a saint's classic in his hand, slammed the book on the table. The two maidservants were so frightened that their hands trembled and they could not help but increase their strength. This caused Liu Xianlang, who was fond of eating stones when he was young, to feel a wave of pain. This great scholar used to take bait before. Today, not only in the summer, even in the winter, he had to eat ice to relieve his qi. Fortunately, compared to the other 3 families who had taken the 5 minerals powder, he was much better off. However, to the scholars of Gangnam-do, this was nothing. Liu Xianlang was in pain from taking the 5 minerals powder. He could grit his teeth and endure the pain. However, the lowly maidservants did not serve him well. They were immediately slapped in the face. A palm print appeared on their smooth cheeks. Only then did Liu Xuanlang's mood improve slightly. He signaled a maidservant to retrieve the book. Holding it in his hand, he coldly said, "Incense burner, what a fitting name." A cold snort came from the door. "If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place?" The 2 maidservants' faces were as white as snow, contrasting with the red palm print. Liu Xianlang waved his hand impatiently. They quickly bowed their heads and left. They did not even dare to call out their honorifics. They just kept their mouths shut and left. This was because that person did not like them to talk. If they spoke, it would dirty her ears. At the door stood an old woman who was no longer in her prime. Her expression was cold and gloomy. She had a face that did not have any good fortune to speak of. She looked gloomy. The old woman said in a strange tone, "When I came here, I met that B*tch. She even paid her respects to me." Liu Xianlang, only you can pick such a virtuous daughter-in-law. What a blessing. Liu Xianlang coldly said, "The eldest brother is the father. What can I do?" The old woman sneered. Her voice was like that of a ghost. What an understatement. My son was killed because of your lack of understanding of the big picture. Liu Xianlang angrily said, "Quan is still my son." The old woman sneered, "Liu Xianlang, you have a few sons. I only have Quan Liu Xianlang dejectedly said, "I want to read." The old woman stared at the man who should have helped and respected each other. Her face was distorted. She turned around and said, "Liu Xianlang, don't forget who my father is. Back then, you did not stop that widow from entering our house. This time, if you dare to let that little bastard surnamed Su into our house, I will not let you off." Liu Xianlang waited for her to leave. He tore a saint's classic in half and leaned against the chair, panting. The housekeeper hurried over and knocked on the door in a panic. He did not care about the usual etiquette. His lips were pale as he bent down and whispered a shocking news that shocked the whole city. After hearing it, Liu Xuanlang's expression was uncertain. His 10 fingers tightly grasped the chair. This famous scholar of Jiangnan, who had been praised by his late father for being calm in every major event, showed a hint of fear and muttered, "What should I do?" Chapter 237. For no reason, the Liu manor closed the manor door in broad daylight. The servant girl nicknamed Xiao Er hurried back to the courtyard to tell the young lady this sensitive news. The most famous vixen widow in Gangnam-do was lying on the bed reading a novel about scholars and beauties. However, compared to the first snow, it was unbearable to look at. After hearing Xiao Er's report, she was absent-minded. She thought it would take at least 2 or 3 days for her brother to arrive in Yangchun City. She did not care about the Liu manor's little tricks. She was not stupid. The family that Lu Lighting of Jiangxin County belonged to was only a second-rate aristocratic family in Yangzhou. How could they enter the eyes of the imperial palace? The marriage alliance between the Hu Pavilion Lu and the other three aristocratic families was complicated. It could not be said that they were bound together for good or ill, but it was true that they were bound together for good or ill. Without Lu Xuanlong's tacit approval, how could the imperial concubine from the palace be involved? Perhaps the mastermind behind the scenes was Lu Xianlang, the father-in-law in name. However, she was too lazy to care. No matter how Lu Qingquan died, she would have to take the blame for her husband's death. No matter how harsh and cold her parents-in-law were, she still performed all the etiquette that a daughter-in-law should have. As for often going to famous temples to listen to the debates of famous scholars and being silently criticized, she did not care about it. She liked to see those self-proclaimed distinguished scholars become as excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood when they saw her enter a banquet. Thus, when she was slapped in the face by the wife surnamed Lu at Baogua Temple, she only laughed. God knows who pitied who. After marrying far away to Jiangnan, she could be said to have seen through these scholars. Most of them had their eyes above their heads and relied on the shadow of their ancestors to not make progress. They rested on their past achievements. The officials from Gangnam-do, for example, were completely different from the remonstrants in the north. They liked to pick on trivial matters to make life difficult for the emperor. They were not afraid of being flogged by the court and were not afraid of being publicly humiliated. From time to time, they would make a scene of remonstrating to death. It felt like they were afraid that the emperor would not be angry or annoyed. They scrupulously adhered to orthodoxy and were loyal to the law to the point of being paranoid. It was no wonder that many scholars said that officials from Gangnam-do were the most like officials. However, the Jiangnan Dao had indeed produced a small group of rather formidable characters. They were well versed in politics, and their methods were well practiced. They were able to govern the world and help the people. However, these civil and military officials who held authority in their hands had all left the Jiangnan Dao, like carps leaping over the Dragon Gate, and were never willing to return. They were not keen on talking about the profound, but no one could deny that it was these important officials who had truly propped up the Jiangnan Dao to flourish. If it was up to her, Lu Daolin, the head of the Lu family, who controlled half of the imperial college, was one of them. The Minister of Personnel, Yu Lian, and the General of Dragon, Su Gong, were also one of them. As for Lu Xianlang and a large group of so-called famous scholars who were renowned in both the north and south of the Yangtze River, they lacked a lot of perspective. These old fellows only focused on the rise and fall of their clan status. If they rose, they would be wild with joy. If they fell, it would be as if they had lost their parents. In their eyes, the martial artists who had made great contributions to the dynasty during the Spring and Autumn War were just crude and barbaric generals. When they said that they were a family of generals, they were far more derogatory than praising. In Gangnam-do, they were especially disliked. If she was just an ordinary daughter of a family of generals, her spine would have been broken by the moral gentleman. Fortunately, who was she? She was the eldest daughter of the butcher, Su Shao. The servant girl who loved her the most asked softly with a face full of anticipation, "Miss, when will His Royal Highness arrive at our Yangchun city?" The widow, Su Jihu, used a finger to scratch the little girl's beautiful face and teased, "Pinch your fingers and count. How many times have you asked in the past 2 days? Have you asked 10 times? The little girl blushed and said, "This servant is hoping that His Highness will help Miss vent her anger. Lu Lighting and that shrew are really too hateful." Su Jihu threw the book away and stretched. He smiled and said, "The latest would be the day after tomorrow. The last time my younger brother sent a letter, he had already arrived in Xiongbao County." The servant girl, Chao Er, who had been bought by the widow for 10 taels of silver, laughed out loud. Her limpid eyes curved into a pair of crescent moons. She cleverly said, compared to the second princess, His Highness still prefers Mississippi. Su Jihu hugged the girl's delicate body and rested his chin on her forehead. He laughed heartily and said, "You really know how to talk." Outside the Lu mansion, the second housekeeper, who had just understood what Lu Xianlang meant, gave a look to the gatekeeper, whose status in Hutton County was comparable to that of a sixth-rank official. The gatekeeper hurriedly opened the side door, allowing only one person to enter and exit. The second housekeeper's surname was originally not Lu, but because of his loyalty, the Lu family bestowed him with the surname Lu. Don't underestimate this change of surname. In the era where the well-dressed gentry looked at the children of poor families as if they were dogs, it was already a great honor. The second housekeeper's name was now Lu Dongyang. For more than 10 generations, he had served the Lu family. The head housekeeper had followed the head of the Lu family to the capital. Lu Dongyang held great power in the Hutton County family and had been influenced by the Lu family's simple and upright style. He liked to step on wooden poles and wear crane cloaks with large sleeves in heavy snow. He claimed that in his life, he liked to wear cold clothes, drink cold food, and sleep cold. Therefore, the Hutton County gave him the elegant title of Mr. Four Han. He walked out of the side door alone and saw a group of 45 elite light cavalry escorting the carriage. "You can give me the name card. I'll visit again when I have time." Captain Yuan Meng's face was gloomy, but he couldn't act rashly. His Royal Highness wasn't present, and after all, His Highness's closest daughter, Commandery Princess Chang, was living here. As for the Lu family's status in Gangnam-do and how powerful they were, would he care about these foul things? Probably seeing through the awkward situation of these Bailiang barbarians, the second housekeeper, Lu Dongyang, with the deep foundation of the Linlang Lu family, suddenly woke up from the shock when he first heard about the bloody deeds of these people. He was no longer afraid and sneered in his heart. 50 light cavalry dared to act so boldly in Hutton County. They really didn't know what was good for them. What kind of scholars were those unlucky scholars whose blood spilled on the scene in the restaurant? They were nothing more than low-class people in Hutton County. At most, they were the descendants of the Jian men or the officialdom. They were thousands of miles away from becoming a scholar. Did they really think that they could be domineering in Hutton County by killing a few low-class people? They had to lower their heads and beg the Lu mansion to bribe them. How could this group of barbarians be qualified to enter the Lu mansion? In the carriage, Princess Jing and Pei Nanwei had been lifting the curtain and watching from the side. They were sitting on top of the mountain and watching the tigers fight with relish. Chapter 238. After Su Shao, Gu Jiantang, and a few other vassals toppled the 10 great clans of the spring and autumn period, the Liang dynasty vaguely formed 3 major clans. Gangnam-do was one of them. After the Liang dynasty destroyed the 8 kingdoms, it ordered a portion of the clans of the 8 kingdoms to move to the capital and form another group through marriage. There were also some clans who took the initiative to move north in the past 20 years. During the reign of Hongjia, it was the most frequent. There were no less than 300,000 people. Thus, it was called the Gangnam-do northward migration. Most of them chose Gangnam-do, which was rich and far from the capital. This undoubtedly strengthened the strength of the 4 clans of Yangzhou. Under the influence of the current master, Lu Daolin, the number of talents the Lu clan absorbed was second only to the Yu clan. Naturally, the Lu clan had its own pride and confidence. If the guy who dared to stab a general of Qingzhou to death in front of Zhao Heng was here, there would be nothing to see in this undercurrent. Without a doubt, he would lead these brave and fearless white horse soldiers to crush them. But since he went to Jiangxin County, it would be interesting. If the Hutton County government had a powerful general who did not fear the Bailiang army, it would be even more lively and interesting. Thinking of this, Princess Pei finally revealed a long-lost smile. Jiang and I, who was sitting in the same carriage, was dazed. This sister was really beautiful. The old god of swords, Li Chungang, lazily leaned against the carriage door and dozed off. He had made up his mind not to get involved in such family matters. At some point, Yu Wei stepped out of the carriage. Holding the white cat, Wu Mainyang, she stood at the bottom of the steps. She looked at the second housekeeper who had pretended to be someone else and said calmly, "Open the middle gate." Lu Dongyang sneered and pointed at the sign. Yu Wei turned her head to Yuan Meng sitting on a warhorse and said calmly, "Field Officer Yuan, the Lu clan of Hutting County treated us with respect. Of course, we have to return the favor." Yuan Meng was puzzled. First of all, he was not clear about the relationship between His Highness and this beautiful courtesan. Since she was qualified to accompany His Highness out of Bailiang, she could not be too bad. Only an idiot would treat her as a famous courtesan. Secondly, the way she returned the gift was very particular. Therefore, he looked at the courtesan who had always given people a feeling of weakness and waited for her to continue. If she only told the Phoenix Battalion to turn around and leave, he would definitely look down on her. Unexpectedly, Yu Wei sneered and said, "Stab this blind servant to death." Earlier, His Highness said that after killing him, the corpse must be left at the door. Now, it seems that there is no need to waste energy. We are only here to see Princess Chang. When the time comes, if Princess Chang says that it is not suitable without the main door, the Lu Manor can just install it. If Princess Chang doesn't agree, then kill whoever dares to make a move. Yuan Meng laughed heartily and cupped his fists as a sign of respect. Then, he turned his head and said in a deep voice, "Draw your blade and return the gesture." Yu Wei hugged the charmingly naive white cat and turned to walk back to the carriage. The red-faced second steward was left behind, so angry that he couldn't speak. When he saw the Bailiang cavalry draw their blades, the fear that had just disappeared once again enveloped his body. Especially when he saw the fierce lieutenant jump up the steps, he was so scared that he immediately turned around and tried to run through the side door to ask for help. However, a person could not outrun a horse, let alone a Bailiang warhorse. When second steward Lu Dongyang stepped through the door, Yuan Meng's blade hacked down. He fell into a pool of blood and crawled forward with difficulty. This scene caused some of the servants in the manor to cry out in shock. Yuan Meng dismounted his horse and gave this Sir Sihan a heavy stab. Then, he grabbed a leg and threw him out of the side door. His Royal Highness had told him before leaving that the corpse should be left at the door. Yuan Meng did not pay any attention to the Lu Manor servants who had scattered like birds and beasts. He stood at the door and gave the order, "Tear down the middle door." Princess Pei was stunned. She looked at Yu Wei, whose words and actions had always been as gentle as water, and was somewhat stunned. Jiangxin County, Lu Manor. The Lu Manor was considered a family with good roots in Yangzhou. However, the nobles were also divided into different ranks. Compared to the four great clans, the difference was like heaven and earth. Lu Lighting, nicknamed Mr. Qingzhai, was currently comforting his wife. He was famous in Gangnam-do for his culinary skills. During this period of time, he did not care about the old adage that a gentleman should stay away from the kitchen. Almost every day, he personally cooked for his wife and racked his brains to please her. Lu Lighting was tall and slender. In Gangnam-do, he was like a crane in a flock of chickens. He had an elegant appearance and was born into a noble family. This kind of man was naturally not lacking in romance. A few years ago, when he first met the widow at the White Horse Temple, he was attracted to her. So what if she was a widow? She was the eldest daughter of that butcher and looked so foxy and delicious. It seemed like water could be pinched out with a light pinch. However, although she had a bad reputation and it seemed like anyone would climb into her bed for a night of pleasure, Lu Lighting, who was a womanizer, knew that this beautiful woman had a very cold temperament. This aroused Mr. Qingzhai's infinite desire to win. He tried his best to please her and could not wait to serve her like an empress. A few days ago, she finally relented. When they were admiring the peonies at Baogwa Temple, she said that if he dared to divorce his wife, she would consider it. When Lu Lighting thought about it, he broke out in a cold sweat. How could he have been bewitched? He could not see through her cold temperament. This widow was clearly waiting to watch a show. Therefore, after he stirred up a big mess, his wife somehow got involved with a favored concubine in the palace. He could no longer care about his scholarly demeanor and face. He immediately wrote a poem to break off relations and threw it outside the Lu Manor. Fortunately, the widow's reputation had long been ruined. Who would stand on her side? Otherwise, the Lu Manor would not have remained silent and allowed him to splash dirty water. Ha! When Lu Lighting thought of this, he secretly rejoiced. It was a blessing in disguise. If she was not a widow who should be drowned in a pig cage, how could he know that his wife's family had incense burning in the imperial palace in the capital? This was something that could be heard all the way to the heavens. Lu Lighting rubbed his wife's shoulders and carefully asked with a smile, "Wife, why has there been no movement in the palace recently? Why hasn't that concubine sent an edict to Gangnam-do?" Wife Lu put on an indifferent attitude, but in reality, she could only pretend to be mysterious. Not to mention her, at first, even her family didn't know how to make the Empress, who wrote the Admonition for Women, angry. Her father read by the light of a lamp and flipped through the family tree before he vaguely found a very faint relationship. As for why the thunder was loud but the rain was small, suddenly there was no sound. With her family background, how could she know the truth? As for her husband by her side, how could she not know the fishy smell that could not be brought to light? However, since she was married, she could only vent all her anger on that wanton widow. In her opinion, that slap was not wrong at all. This kind of immoral widow who always wanted to seduce men from other families should be paraded through the streets. It was fine for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines, but could it be that you, a widow, wanted to have 3,000 male companions? She was afraid that her husband would continue to pester her about the concubine in the palace, so she could only coldly say, "It's late. Go to sleep." Lu Lighting glanced at his wife's appearance and silently lamented in his heart. She really could not be compared to the heavenly beauty widow Su. Under the moonlight, outside the Lu Manor, 50 brave light cavalry ignored the night curfew and forcefully entered the city, heading straight for the manor. The young master in the lead, wearing a white robe and riding a white horse, did not stop his horse. He urged his horse forward and pulled on the reins. The horse's hooves smashed down on the Lu Manor's central gate and stomped on it. After the horse stepped on the central gate, he urged his horse forward into the Lu Manor. Chapter 239. The middle gate of a slightly larger mansion would not be opened often, especially for the Lu family, which had deep roots in the present age. Not every guest would open the middle gate. Not to mention the county chief of Hutting County, even the governor of Yangzhou and other officials of the border might not have the qualification and honor to do so. The door could be said to be the face of a family. The Lu family was full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. There were hundreds of officials, advisors, and servants. Although they had just sent the housekeeper, Lu Dongyang, to send away the group of people on the street, many people were secretly observing every move here. However, when the Bailiang's light cavalry opened the door, the Lu family did not send out any men of sacrifice. Only a middle-aged Confucian scholar with a pure yang scarf on his head and cloth shoes on his feet walked out. He was dressed simply and shabbily. Behind him was a young servant with a delicate temperament. He held an ancient sword in a black sandalwood scabbard wrapped in the skin of a southern sea shark. Unlike other famous swords, this sword did not have the slightest chill when it was sheathed. The middle-aged man looked at the housekeeper who had died in the courtyard and sighed softly. The door had been opened in an uproar. Lieutenant Yuan Meng and the Confucian scholar in the courtyard looked at each other. The middle-aged man from the Lu family bowed slightly and said indifferently, "Today, the Lu family did not treat guests well." As the housekeeper, Lu Dongyang should be punished, but not to the point of death. A return of gifts needs to be returned. Yuan Meng knew what was good and was on guard. He held the Bailiang knife in his hand tightly. The murderous aura that was nurtured by battle formations was naturally different from the aura of Jianghu people. After the Confucian scholar who was not holding a book but a sword by his side bowed, he faced the drowsy old man in a sheepskin coat in the carriage in the distance. This time, he bowed deeply and said, "I am Liu Baijie from Hutting County. I received the ancient sword Ba Xiu when I was 11 and have been practicing swordsmanship for 36 years. I would like to learn from Senior Li." When the old god of swords heard the two words, Ba Xiu, he slowly opened his eyes and glanced at it. He nodded and said, "It is indeed Yang Yuzhang's sword." This old man was limited by his aptitude and his swordsmanship was mediocre, but his vision was not bad. When this old man fought with others, he would have a headache every time he saw this guy. However, Yang Yuzhang once said that he would not accept any disciples in this lifetime. "How did you obtain the last sword from the Tangxi sword furnace?" Liu Baijie, who introduced herself in front of Li Chungang and performed the etiquette of a junior, smiled and said, "It's probably because I was nicknamed Tangxi when I was young. I met my master by chance and was given the Ba Xiu sword and half of the sword manual. For 36 years, he had not dared to slack off for even a single day. His master held the old senior in high esteem. He said that the two-sleeved green snake could dominate the sword forest for 50 years. Junior has been longing for this for a long time. Today, I have the courage to draw my sword partly because I am forced to do so by my status as a disciple of the Liu family, but mostly because I want to sharpen the inferior swordsmanship that I have cultivated behind closed doors for 36 years. If I lose, I implore Senior not to take your anger out on the Liu family." The old man with the sheepskin fur coat said impatiently, "Your tone is exactly the same as Yang Yuzhang's. Why don't you try? If you only have the craftsmanship of Yang Yuzhang's swordsmanship and not the ingenuity of his swordsmanship, then you are not worthy of this old man taking action. Who the F***ck wants to make things difficult for you aristocratic families? Do you have nothing better to do? Swatting flies with a bamboo pole in a latrine pit, you will be splashed with feces no matter what." This old man did not believe in heresy back then and suffered a great loss at the hands of lame Su. At this point, the old man immediately shut his mouth. Exposing one's shortcomings was not Li Chuangong's usual style. Liu Baijie smiled and stretched out 2 fingers to gently stroke the scabbard. The famed Ba Xiu sword was half unsheathed. At this moment, a familiar sound of footsteps came from behind. The woman called out, "Little uncle." Liu Baijie, the youngest and most leisurely of the Liu clan's glittering jewels 7 jades in the lake pavilion, had a sorrowful expression on his face. His fingers swiped back and the Ba Xiu ancient sword that had appeared in the world immediately returned to its scabbard. Everyone only caught a glimpse of a bright azure edge. Liu Baijie was the youngest son of the previous master of the Liu clan, Liu Xianhua. Compared to the current master's eldest son, Liu Daolin, he was a full 20 years younger. Liu Baijie was born of a concubine. He was naturally intelligent, but he was indifferent to fame and fortune. He was not passionate about the 3 immortals of Confucianism and was obsessed with the way of the sword. Until now, he had not married, so naturally he did not have any children. He rarely showed his face in the Liu clan. Among the influential members of the Liu clan, Liu Baijie was the only one who was truly close to the widow. He, who did not have any children, largely regarded Su Jihu as half a daughter. If he had not secretly stifled the signs of many disasters, the Liu clan would have long been in chaos. Not to mention others, the woman whose father was the master of the Su clan had done too many dirty deeds. But he was apprehensive about her identity as his sister-in-law and felt the pain of losing a child. Otherwise, Liu Baijie would not have allowed such a scandal to happen in the Liu clan. After such a big event as the removal of the center gate, which was enough to shock Yangzhou, Su Jihu, no matter how much he was restrained in the Lu clan, still received the news immediately. Only then did he confirm that his younger brother had arrived in Yangchun City. Other than him, who else could have done such a shocking thing? How could Su Jihu bear to blame him? However, the Lu clan was still her home in name. It would not be good to make things too tense, especially when her father-in-law, Lu Xianlang, was willing to do anything for the sake of his reputation. Which famous person would not cherish their reputation? She giggled at Lu Baijie and called out, "Little uncle," in a coquettish manner. In return, she received a helpless expression. Su Jihu did not exchange pleasantries with the few elders in the Lu clan who were easy to talk to. She ran out of the main door. All the valiant light cavalry dismounted and knelt on one knee, respectfully saying, "Beiliang's Phoenix Battalion pays respect to Princess Chang." Su Jihu ignored them. Looking left and right, she did not see her younger brother's gentle smiling face that she had always dreamed of. She was immediately disappointed. The maidservant, Blue Bird, could already walk with difficulty, but her complexion was still unsightly. Just as she was about to kneel, Su Jihu, who revealed a frightened expression but quickly concealed it, stepped forward to support her. Biting her lips, she asked in a low voice, "Where is Fingnian?" Blue Bird replied softly, "His Highness went to Jiangxin County. He said he would rush back to Yangchun City overnight." Su Jihu stamped her foot. Her eyes were red as she muttered, "That idiot." She took a deep breath and said rather majestically, "Follow me into the Lu clan residence." If Lu Baijie, who was of the same generation as Lu Daolin and Lu Xianlang, did not stop her, who would dare to? Lu Baijie's illustrious identity as the son of a powerful family was there, but his other identity was even more intimidating. There was a special sword review that listed Lu Baijie of Huding County in Yangzhou. The review said that Lu Tongxi's swordsmanship was upright and vast. Although the name of the sword contained the word tyrannical, it was fully deserving of being called the Sword of the King. The Lu clan residence's courtyard was deep and was a typical Jiangnan garden style. The size of the courtyard was not as large as the other three clan residences. However, the Sincerity Garden, which had hosted 6 emperors, was the most famous. The lake and rockery in the garden were created by the chief stone-folding master. One mountain, one peak, exuding vitality. Every stone, every seam, was properly accounted for. It was praised by the late emperor as being unique in Jiangnan. It should be known that the gardens in Jiangnan were the best in the world. One could see the ingenuity of the Sincerity Garden. Su Jihu personally led the way. Along the way, he briefly and comprehensively explained the essence of the garden structure to Yu Yue. Lu Baijie and the sword attendant were at the back. Coincidentally, Li Chungang, Jiang Inai, and Princess Jing'an were at the back. Lu Baijie, who had not used her sword today, asked the old god of swords about some doubts in the art of swordsmanship. The old man had some good karma with half of the younger generation, Yang Yuzhang, so he did not put on airs. Although Lu Baijie's character was a typical aristocratic family, in the end, she was like the sword. She was not old-fashioned and constrained. Lu Baijie only glanced at Princess Pei from the corner of her eyes and did not look at her again. Chapter 240. Su Jihu lived in the freehand garden in the northwest corner. The yard was not small, but there were pitifully few servant girls. It was slightly cold. The Phoenix Battalion, including Yuan Meng, were arranged to live in 2 yards not far from each other. At the gate of the yard, Lu Baijie bowed again before leaving. Entering the yard, Su Jihu had his personal servant girl Chiao Er bring some iced plum soup. After sitting down, he asked, "What happened on the road?" Blue Bird truthfully reported everything that had happened at the reed marsh. Blue Bird spoke calmly and tirelessly. The danger involved could not be described as simple twists and turns. Su Jihu's expression rose and fell. In the end, when he heard that His Royal Highness was safe and sound, he covered his chest and sighed heavily in relief. Su Jihu turned his head with a strange gaze to Pei Nanwei, who still had not been able to sit down. This unruly younger brother was really something. He even dared to steal a Wang Fei. From afternoon to dusk, the freehand garden was calm. Su Jihu asked the girls about Su Fengnian and especially liked to hear some embarrassing stories. Su Jihu did not have the good mood to be treated coldly by the Lu manner that was within reason. After a sumptuous dinner, a well-educated page came and lightly knocked on the door. He came from the smallest retreat garden in the Lu manor. Lu Baijie, who was regarded as a sword immortal by the people of Yangzhou, did not live there much. For most of the year, she took this page to travel and visit hermits. The one who opened the door was the servant girl Chao Er. For some reason, the two of them did not see eye to eye. At this moment, it seemed that enemies would not meet unless they were enemies. Seeing Chao Er, the page said coldly and stiffly, "My master wants to see your mistress." The atmosphere was already strange. After these words were said, it became even more awkward. Chao Er huffed coldly and left after saying that she understood. Looking at her back with clear eyes, the page secretly revealed a thread of annoyance. Sitting in the pavilion by the lake, Lu Baijie smiled slightly and muttered to herself, "The youth already knows the taste of worry." Su Jihu walked out of the garden and sat down in the pavilion. He said guiltily, "I've troubled you this time." Sword immortal Lu, who didn't have any of the bad habits of a noble family but still had the backbone of a noble family's descendant, shook his head and said, "It's not that I'm causing trouble for little uncle, but if I do that, it will be even more difficult for you to conduct yourself in the Lu estate." Su Jihu said indifferently, "This is nothing. It's nothing more than a fake smile in front of me and a colder smile behind me." Lu Baijie sighed and said, "Let's not talk about second steward Lu Dongyang first. His Highness the Crown Prince ordered his retainers to commit murder in the downtown area. No matter how bad their conduct was, they were still scholars from Hutting County. One of them was even a descendant of a servant. If the Crown Prince didn't dismiss him, little uncle could still go to elder brother and say a few words. Lu Manor would come forward to clean up this mess. At most, we'll just give some compensation to the families of the lesser concubines, as well as a few officials' salary. Anyone would have complaints about using money to buy their lives, but a proper official's position should be enough to shut their mouths. For such a troublesome matter, little uncle doesn't mind making an exception for you. But to tear down the central gate of the Lu estate and kill Lu Dongyang in front of the entire street of Hutting family, second brother cares about his face and not adding insult to injury is already the limit of his patience. The Lu family has experienced ups and downs for hundreds of years and has suffered a lot of humiliation. It's just that in the past 100 years, the bumpy days have gradually lessened. Today, we've been humiliated to this extent. I'm afraid even the master will be angry." Su Jihu was silent. Lu Baijie frowned and said, "Jihu, at this time and place, there are only the two of us. Little uncle will speak frankly. As His Royal Highness younger brother, how can you act without any regard for the consequences? Do you really not care about the opinions of those in the capital at all? You must know that no matter how powerful your father is, in the end, he still set up political opponents like Zhang Jiulu and Gu Jiantang, who are pillars of the dynasty. Moreover, he wants to push the 4 clans of Yangzhou to the enemy's side of Beiliang. Because of you, Su Shufei was demoted to the cold palace. If it was His Majesty's idea, it would be fine. If it was His Majesty's idea, do you think the Su family will still have any friendship left in His Majesty's heart? Moreover, don't you know who Su Shufei is? These years, the Gumu Su family has spent almost all of their manpower and resources to pave the way for her. Now that they've suffered such a calamity, even if the Gumu Su family, who used to have a close relationship with the Lu family, will not be able to advance and retreat together like before. It's exactly the same as Quan Er's sudden death. You'll have to take the blame." Su Jihu raised his head and smiled. I'm used to it. Lu Baijie said bitterly, oh, you. Su Jihu leaned against the red pillar and looked into the distance. He said softly, that younger brother of mine went to Jiangxin County to find trouble with that Lu lighting. Lu Baijie said in a low voice, is he still going to cause trouble? Is he not afraid of being unable to clean up the mess? If someone with ulterior motives fanned the flames, then it would not be just people fishing for fame that would jump out. Even the entire Jiangnan Dao would be in an uproar. After all these years, have you not seen through the so-called famous people of Jiangnan Dao who value fame more than life? I know, I've seen through it a long time ago. Qingzhou values benefits. Yangzhou values fame. Which Gangnam-do scholar doesn't admire my father-in-law's words, even death is more important than Mount Tai? Su Jihu squinted his eyes and smiled. But this younger brother of mine, probably because my father is the king of Beiliang, he doesn't care about the things that many people would risk their lives to hold in their hands. However, he cares about the things that even poor people don't care about the most. Little uncle, if you tell him these very reasonable advice, he probably won't listen to it. Lu Baijie, who had the reputation of Tangxi's sword fairy, sighed. If you stop him from entering the Lu residence, your future days will be easier. But if you really go and stop him, not to mention whether you can stop him or not, you'll be the first to fall out with me. Su Jihu laughed without caring about etiquette. Uncle, you're so pitiful as a sword fairy. Lu Baijie looked at his daughter's smiling face with some sadness in his eyes. Back then, the woman he admired also had such a natural smile. If he had been more resolute and talked less about morality and the overall situation, perhaps he wouldn't have had any regrets. How could there be so many ifs in the world? Lu Baijie closed his eyes. Not far away, the page boy and the servant girl were arguing. Would these two children also understand the unusualness of thinking it was normal at the time, many years later? After Lu Baijie left, Su Jihu sat in the pavilion and waited until late at night. When His Royal Highness appeared outside the Lu residence, the white horse was dragging a cold corpse that had long been badly mutilated. Obviously, it had been dragged all the way from Jiangxin County to Hutting County. Although Lu Baijie, who was guarding the door, had expected this, he still felt extremely shocked when he saw this scene. After Su Fengnian dismounted, he raised his head to look at Lu Baijie. Because of his elder sister, Su Jihu, he didn't have any ill feelings toward this Tangxi sword fairy. He only saw Lu Baijie put one hand on the hilt of her sword and supported it with a Ba Xiu ancient sword. Su Fengnian said expressionlessly, "Is Mr. Tangxi trying to sell me some benevolence and righteousness?" Lu Baijie snorted coldly and turned to leave. In addition to shock, he was also puzzled. How did the Crown Prince of Beiliang get so seriously injured? Su Jihu ran all the way, leaving the servant girl Qiao Er far behind. She rushed out of the Lu residence's gate and stopped very close. She smiled and said, "Ah, we've caused trouble again." She didn't notice that Su Fengnian's back was dripping with blood. When the horse dragged the corpse through the city gate, the assassin, like a gecko, stuck to the ceiling of the cave, waiting for an opportunity, struck and almost shattered his spine. But Su Fengnian just stared at her with red eyes and said softly, "Sister, let's go home, okay?" Chapter 241. In the Free Will Garden, Su Jihu's private room was filled with the stench of blood. Even the 3 purple smoke sandalwood furnaces that had been added with high-grade ambergris biscuits could not conceal the smell. Su Jihu's face was pale as he looked at Li Chungang, who was taking Su Fengnian's pulse. His Royal Highness's upper body was naked as he lay on the bed. His spine was badly mangled. The old god of swords had a look of pity on his face. Su Jihu, who was not afraid of anything, was so scared that tears fell down his cheeks. He covered his mouth with both hands, not daring to cry out loud. Su Fengnian, who had just taken a stroll through the gates of hell, did not look like a dying person. Li Chungang nodded and said, "He won't die." What a pity. If the hand knife had been an inch deeper, even De Luo Jin Xian would not have been able to save him. Now, it's just a superficial wound. Is it the young lady who killed Wang Mingyin? Su Fengnian's face was gloomy as he grunted. He brought his halberd, Ningame, Wei Shuyang, and 50 light cavalry to Jiangxin County. From the beginning, he had agreed with the 2 retainers to lure the snake out of its hole. However, he did not expect that the lady who raised the big cat was so patient. On the way from Yangchun City to Jiangxin County and back, His Royal Highness had deliberately revealed so many flaws, but she did not take advantage of them. After entering the city gate, Su Fengnian had just breathed a sigh of relief when the assassin, who had been sticking to the dark wall like a gecko, gently dropped down. Fortunately, she did not seem to have expected that His Royal Highness was already on the 4th floor of the great yellow courtyard. If it had been Su Fengnian in the reeds, his spine would have been shattered by her stab. However, after several failed assassinations, the embarrassed and angry girl immediately gave chase. Su Fengnian stepped on the side wall with the tip of his foot, and she followed closely behind. Just as she was about to deliver a second stab, Ningame's halberd had already been thrown out. Wei Shuyang's figure also swept away like a hawk, and the white horses all brought out their crossbows. Seeing that the situation was not good, she did not continue to fight. She slipped out of the inner gate, and her slender fingers dug into the wall like tofu. After a few leaps, she disappeared in an instant. When they were passing through the Xiongbao County, the horses were drinking water by the stream. She, who had been waiting for a long time, also made a move once. She rushed out from the bottom of the stream, but at that time, Li Chungang was not far away. In an instant, Sword Chi rushed over and did not give her a chance to get close. Everyone only saw this girl hiding in the water, disappearing like a fish. The dense rain of crossbows and short halberds were unable to hurt her in the slightest. She really was a bone cancer. Su Fengnian comforted her, "Sister, it's really all right." Su Jihu, who had put down the huge stone in her heart, wiped her tears and smiled. "Pa!" She fiercely slapped him on the butt. "It's all right, it's all right. With your conduct, how can I sleep in the same bed as you and whisper to each other at night?" Li Chuangong's expression was strange. He originally wanted to tease her, but after thinking about it, he gave up. With Su Fengnian's narrow-mindedness, he would not dare to be angry with him. Perhaps he would vent his anger on Jiang Ni's head. Damn, everything has its vanquisher. This old man also had a day like this. There was no justice in the world. He reluctantly got up and left the fragrant boudoir. In the room, Bluebird and the servant girl Qiao Air also tactfully left. Only this pair of siblings who had been close since childhood remained. Although it was an external injury, the flesh was torn open and it was not good. Su Fengnian was just about to take a break when he felt that something was wrong. He was both helpless and resentful. "Sister, why did you take off my pants? There's no injury there." Su Jihu did not have the perception and arrogance of an older sister. She sweetly said, "Fengnian, I'm not at ease. It's better to take a look. There are no outsiders here. Why are you blushing?" Su Fengnian reached out to protect his belt. He turned his head and angrily said, "Sister. How old are you already? Don't be so shameless, okay?" Su Jihu pretended to have a face full of hidden bitterness. If it was someone with a shallow cultivation, like those famous scholars in Gangnam-do, they would have lost their souls. But Su Fengnian had been with this older sister for many years. How could he not know her tricks? He didn't dare to loosen his grip at all, fearing that she would succeed. The siblings were in a stalemate. Su Fengnian begged for mercy. "Sister, I'm begging you, okay? No one takes advantage of the situation and torments the injured like you." Su Jihu resentfully withdrew her hand. But she did not forget to slap his royal highnesses but again. She chuckled and said, "Oh, very perky. It's good to practice the blade. This physique is very good. When your injury is healed, the fertile water should not be left to outsiders. You have to let me have some fun." Su Fingnian had a headache and said, "If you continue like this, I'll go to my second sister's place tomorrow." Su Jihu leaned over, her charming face close to his royal highness. Her breath smelled like orchids. She snorted and said, "You heartless fellow. Tell me, who in the family doted on you the most? Who wet the bed when you were young? And who secretly washed your quilt? Now you're turning your back on me." Su Fingnian turned his head to look at this dignified and virtuous face. It was difficult for outsiders to see it. He said softly, "Sister, why don't you come home with me?" Su Jihu squatted at the head of the bed. She rested her chin on her hand and stared at her younger brother who had just entered Yangchen and started a massacre. She said gently, "This is sister's home. A married daughter is like spilled water. Why else would there be the saying, spilled water can't be recovered? Even if sister goes back to Beiliang, it's only to visit family, not to go home." Su Fingnian didn't say anything. Su Jihu reached out and stroked this fellow who didn't hesitate to make enemies in Gangnam-do for her. After looking at him for so many years, she still couldn't get tired of looking at him. She said softly, "My youngest uncle, that Tangxi sword immortal Lu Baijie, said that you're going against the tide and won't amount to anything. This is because he doesn't know how much Fingnian likes sister. Of course, sister knows how much your heart aches. You killed those boring scholars in the city and went to Jiangxin County to drag Lu Lighting to death to Hutting County. Other than wanting to avenge sister, you also want to force sister out of Gangnam-do so that I can go back to Beiliang with you. Am I right? You fool, I'm still your sister no matter where I am. If I really go back to Beiliang, will I be happy? In the future, when your second sister goes back from Shangyin Academy, she'll be jealous of you every day. I can't win against her when it comes to reasoning, so I don't want to suffer this. This time, you came to see sister first. She's not happy even when you call her second sister. She'll be furious." Su Fingnian snorted in a fit of pique. Su Jihu reached out and pinched this increasingly angular face. She said with a smile, "You're becoming more and more attractive, but you're still a child." Su Fingnian was just about to speak when Su Jihu waved her hand and said, "Go to sleep. Don't chase sister away. I'll take a good look at you." Su Fingnian fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 242. When His Royal Highness woke up in the morning the next day, he found that his eldest sister had fallen asleep at the head of the bed. He got up with a wry smile. The wound on his back had already scabbed over, and the speed of his recovery was astonishing. Although there was still a long way to go before he reached the Vajra realm, he already had a huge advantage over the body of an ordinary martial artist. The sound of Su Fingnian waking up did not wake Su Jihu up, but it startled the servant girls sleeping next door, Chow Er Chow. Most of the servant girls who did their jobs were not deeply asleep. She casually put on a coat and trotted in. It was a hot summer day, so she was dressed lightly. Her growing figure was graceful, and she had the unique moist spirit of a Jiangnan woman. Her body was light and pure. Otherwise, the capital's officials and dignitaries would not have raised thin horses in their households. The thin horses trained by the Gangnam-do and the West Chu concubines were known as the Two Beauties. Su Fingnian raised his finger and shushed her, indicating for the budding young girl to be quiet. She glanced at His Royal Highness's naked upper body, and her small face flushed red. She quickly lowered her head, afraid that she would overstep the rules. The higher the status of a powerful family, the stricter the rules and regulations. The masters also had different personalities, so the servants naturally did not dare to be arrogant and overstep the boundaries. Moreover, the servant girl Qiao had heard too much about the arrogant behavior of Bailiang's heir apparent from the Mrs. Mouth. In addition to yesterday's disturbance, she did not dare to be careless. The little girl originally thought that His Royal Highness would at most go to Jiangxin County to beat up that henpecked Master Qingzhai after seeing the Mississippi. She would never have thought that His Royal Highness would use a horse to drag Lu Lighting's corpse from Jiangxin County to the Lu residence. Su Fengnian picked up a mutton-fat jade bottle at the head of the bed, lowered his voice, and chuckled, "Qiao heir, help me apply the ointment. I can't reach my back." The little girl trembled as she took the jade bottle. She poured out the fragrant ointment onto her fingertips and sat on the edge of the bed. Her face, ears, and neck were red as she gently applied the ointment onto His Royal Highness's back. When her fingertips touched the skin, her delicate body trembled. The girl's sparkling and translucent skin was almost dripping with water. However, when she saw that in addition to the new injuries on His Royal Highness's back, there were also some old scars, she only felt shocked. She didn't dare to imagine why His Royal Highness, who had such a prestigious family background, would be covered in scars. The little maid Qiao heir lived in the courtyard of the Lu residence, which was as deep as the Marquis's palace. She was especially fortunate to be under Su Jihu's protection. How could she understand the sinister ups and downs of the Jianghu? To her, if the miss ate less rice or caught a cold from heatstroke, it would be a big deal. It was like being slapped in the face by a fierce woman. She would risk her life to avenge the miss and repay the kindness. Generally speaking, Qiao heir was lucky to be able to meet such a widowed master like Su Jihu. She didn't need to worry about being molested by her master's men. In the aristocratic families, how many maids as delicious and seductive as her could maintain their virginity? They would have long been secretly eaten or openly eaten until not even their bones were left. The private affairs of the boudoir were something that even the moral model sages and scholars couldn't say anything about. With her help, Su Fengnian put on a new set of clothes and quietly got off the bed. He smiled and said, "Qiao heir, I'm going out to get some fresh air. You just wait for my sister and let her wake up naturally." Qiao heir timidly and shyly agreed. Only now did she secretly notice that His Royal Highness was tall and slender. He was much taller than the Gangnam-do men. Su Fengnian walked out of the room. Blue Bird was standing in the courtyard. Master and servant left the freehand garden and strolled along the lake. Su Fengnian saw that the Tangxi sword fairy Lu Baijie was already sitting in the pavilion. He didn't know if she was waiting for him. Su Fengnian walked over without hesitation. Lu Baijie was the youngest of the 7 glittering jewels of the Lu family. Because he had never married and had children, he did not leave the family and lived in Retreat Garden. Because the head of the family, Lu Daolin, held the position of the Right Chancellor of the Imperial College in the capital, all the affairs in the Lu residence were usually handled by Lu Xianlang. Tangxi Sword Immortal usually did not care about worldly affairs, but the more he was like this, the more his words carried weight on important matters. Even Lu Daolin and Lu Xianlang, who held the power of the Lu family, had to pay attention to the opinions of this concubine-born brother. Among the 7 heroes of the Lu family, apart from these 3, one of them had devoted himself to cultivating Taoism and one of them had entered Buddhism, while the other 2 were officials in Yangzhou. They were both primary grade 4 officials. Being a local primary grade 4 official was already a true high-ranking official. They were far more popular than being a primary grade 4 official or even a secondary grade 3 official in the capital. Although the officials in the capital had always looked down on the officials from other places, the ones who truly wanted to enter the cabinet were mostly secondary grade 4 officials. It would take at most 6 years and at least 3 years to accumulate enough experience and popularity before returning to the capital. Only then could they be considered as the true pillars of the dynasty. Originally, with Lu Baijie's talent, he could have become the backbone of the Lu family, second only to the head of the family, Lu Daolin. However, the head of the family was still his elder brother, Lu Daolin, so Lu Xianlang could only complain. After entering the pavilion, Su Fengnian gave a junior salute and said respectfully, "Fengnian pays his respects to Mr. Tang Shi. Last night, I mistakenly thought that Mr. Tang Shi wanted to stop me from entering the mansion. In a moment of desperation, I spoke disrespectfully. I hope Mr. Tang Shi won't blame me." Lu Baijie said coldly, "His Royal Highness is too serious. However, I don't have much moral benevolence to sell. Why did your highness enter the pavilion?" Su Fengnian said with a smile, "Big sister has been saying that Mr. Tang Shi is good all these years. Today, I came to ask for a beating from Mr. Tang Shi. Coincidentally, I was a little injured. I thought that Mr. Tang Shi would be gentler." Lu Baijie was obviously stunned for a moment. She said with a smile, "Your highness's scoundrel temper is exactly the same as your sister's." Su Fengnian said, "Both of us learned from Su Shao." This was the first time Lu Baijie heard the two words, Su Shao, from someone's mouth. In Gangnam-do, no matter how famous people talked, they would at most refer to the barbarian son of Bailiang. There were very few who dared to call him Lame Su. At most, they would only do so in private situations, not to mention calling out Su Zhao's name directly. Lu Baijie smiled and said, "How long does your highness want to stay? Do you plan to kill a few more Gangnam-do scholars?" Sword will overflowed in the pavilion. Blue Bird frowned and was about to step into the pavilion when Su Fengnian waved his hand and stopped the daughter of Spear Immortal Wang Xiu. He faced Sword Immortal Tang Shi and said calmly, "It's fine as long as they don't provoke me. I'm not a devil who has nothing better to do than to kill people. It's more like having a full stomach thinking about sex." Lu Baijie smiled coldly and said, "Is your highness not afraid of causing trouble for the king of Bailiang who is still in the capital?" Su Fengnian shook his head and smiled. "Mr. Tang Shi, you don't know. If I came to Gangnam-do calmly and then left Gangnam-do calmly and let those scholars talk about my elder sister, Su Shao would really be angry. Whether it's killing Lu Lighting or scholars, the memorials from Jiangnan are flying to the capital like snowflakes. Su Shao has a headache, but he's actually very happy. When he returns to Bailiang in the future, he might secretly scold me for killing so few." Lu Baijie sighed helplessly and said, "Your highness, your family." However, there was clearly more sincerity in Sword Immortal Tang Shi's faint smile. Su Fengnian looked at the lake and said, "My elder sister still refuses to return to Bailiang. She says this is her home. What's so good about this home? Mr. Tang Shi, please teach me." Unexpectedly, Lu Baijie laughed for no reason and said, "It's not good at all. It's a pity that I don't have the final say in this home. Otherwise, I would have told your sister to scram back to Bailiang long ago. Hurry up and scram. Out of sight, out of mind. Otherwise, I won't be able to enjoy myself when I go out to play." Su Fengnian immediately had a good impression of this Sword Immortal of Yangzhou. He grinned and had a bit of the feeling of a naughty junior interacting with an enlightened senior. Chapter 243. Most of them were acquaintances from Huting County. When they saw the widow Su Jihu get off the carriage, they immediately shut their mouths. Compared to their previous attitude of watching a show, after yesterday's incident, the other counties in Huting County were still fine. However, all the well-informed aristocratic families in Yangchun County had long been shocked speechless by the methods of His Highness the Crown Prince. After killing the scholars on the street, he rampaged through the soldiers in the city that were several times more numerous. It was said that he even dismantled the middle gate of Lu Manor. That night, he dragged Mr. Qingzhai's corpse into the city and threw it at the gate. What kind of behavior was this? How could this be described as tragic? The elders of the aristocratic families in the city got up in the middle of the night and talked with their old friends under the light. They all lamented that this was the greatest humiliation in Yangzhou in 100 years. It was said that Lang Jiang Dong Gong Huang, who was the most ruthless in dealing with the aristocratic families, had received orders to bring 600 elites from the provincial capital to Yangchun today. Who didn't know that Lang Jiang, who killed Gumu Su's third son as soon as he took office, had a deep relationship with the Yu family? Furthermore, he was General Gu Jintang's trusted aide in the past. The gate of the temple was tightly shut. After Su Fingnian got off the carriage, he saw that there was a small and exquisite square pond in front of the temple. Beside the spring, there were green trees hugging each other, and there was also a strange old pine. Su Jihu intimately held his arm and walked over. There were stone dragon heads on each side of the pond. Spring water dripped from the dragon mouths. The water was clear, and the scattered copper coins at the bottom of the pond could be seen clearly. Su Jihu picked up a dead branch and crouched down to stir the spring water. When she stopped stirring, a line as thin as a silver thread would appear on the surface of the water. She raised her head and smiled. "Do you see? It said that this is the scene caused by the mixing of mountain water and spring water. Interesting, isn't it?" Su Fingnian crouched down and wanted to reach into the water to pick up a few copper coins. Su Jihu smacked him with the branch and scolded him jokingly, "Have you gone crazy from being so poor?" Su Fingnian still picked up a copper coin and pinched it between two fingers. He chuckled. "I'll save as much as I can." He stood up. The air outside the temple was fresh and the birds were chirping. He raised his head and saw that the greenery in the temple was higher and higher. He withdrew his gaze. The old pine tree beside him was indeed not vulgar. Its thick trunk twisted left and right, twisting like a crouching dragon. He didn't know if it was the will of the heavens or man. The old god of swords and Jiang and I were standing under the tree. The old man with the sheep fur coat sighed. "The will of the heavens are too sentient, but if it was done by man, it would be too heartless. But I've never seen anyone actually do it, but I've never seen anyone actually do it, but I've said. I've, but I, Su Fingnian smiled and said, "Shall I try?" Su Jihu glared at him. "You dare." When Dum Chao saw this, she smiled gently. His Highness the Crown Prince and the young miss really loved each other. Perhaps because he was caught laughing, Su Fengnian made a face at the little girl. The servant girl was so frightened that she quickly hid behind Su Jihu. The little girl's heart was beating like a deer. She didn't seem to be afraid. Instead, she seemed to have been gently scratched by something and couldn't calm down. Su Jihu turned his head to look at the little girl who was in a daze. He smiled knowingly. How could there be a girl in the world who didn't like her younger brother? But on the surface, Su Jihu still rolled his eyes charmingly at Su Fingnian. He waved the branch as if warning him not to fool around in a Buddhist holy land. The door of the temple slowly opened. The two little monks joined their hands and bowed. It was just that today, the side room was the place where pilgrims and vegetarian meals were provided. After Su Jihu and his entourage took their seats, no one else dared to enter. At Su Fingnian's table, Su Jihu was sitting. In addition to the 9 bushels of Daoist mi and Daoist Wei Shuyang, there was also an empty stool. The maidservant Er Chiao and the military general Ningame were both standing. Princess consort Jean Gan knew her place, and in addition to the fact that she had been terribly bullied on the way here, she was even more unwilling to sit down. Su Jihu was a person who liked crowds. He asked Jiang and I, who was sitting at the next table, to call her over. The little mud girl hesitated for a moment, but didn't refuse. When she approached, Su Jihu pulled her over to sit beside him. He smiled and said, "Jiang and I, you're really getting prettier as you grow up. You were already pretty when you were young. Back then, you were the only one who could compare with Fingnian. At first, I was worried that a girl would change 18 times between childhood and womanhood. I was afraid that you wouldn't be pretty when you grew up, but now it seems that I was worried for nothing. Come, tell sister whether Fingyan bullied you or not. The little mud girl was quite a shrewish girl in front of His Royal Highness and the old God of Swords. At this moment, her face was red and she didn't say anything. Su Fingyan laughed and said, "Your face is red. It's rare, rare." Jiang and I didn't glare at him angrily, but she lifted her foot and stomped on him. His Royal Highness lifted his foot and laughed, I'll hide. You want to fight with me?" With Su Jihu present, Jiang and I didn't make any verbal moves. Su Jihu laughed softly, "It seems like you're often bullied. Don't worry, I'll help you take care of him later." The little mud girl lowered her head and didn't say anything. Su Fingyan muttered, "Is it my sister or her sister?" Su Jihu raised his hand and pretended to hit her, but His Royal Highness leaned to the side. She lovingly stroked Jiang Ni's slender shoulders. "Jiang and I heard that after leaving Bailiang, you've been reading for this scoundrel. This is a good thing. During this period of time, if you come to read Wang Dongxiang's The First Snow to your sister, the price will be doubled. It will all come from that guy's pocket. He won't dare to not pay." Jiang and I raised her head and grunted heavily. It was the first time she smiled this month. Su Fingyan ruined the mood and teased, "Dimples, 2 little dimples." "Ha, I saw it. Fine, double the price is double. It's worth it." Jiang and I immediately put on a straight face, but there was still a smile in her eyes. Naturally, it was all because of Su Jihu. It had nothing to do with that scoundrel. Su Jihu laughed, "Our little Jiang and I looks the best when she smiles. No girl in the world can compare to her. That's why you have to smile more, you won't age easily." An old man wearing a sheepskin coat sitting at the next table with his legs crossed laughed, "Little Su, your sister didn't give birth to this body for nothing. Her heart is much better than yours." Su Jihu hugged the little mud girl, turned his head and smiled charmingly, "Just because of Sword God Li's words, I'll give you 10 jars of good wine." The old sword god gave a thumbs up and praised, "Heroic. This old man will definitely drink this wine. If anyone dares to make things difficult for you in Gangnam-do these days, this old man will be the first to go against them." Su Fingyan was vexed, "Why do I feel like I'm not a good person?" Jiang and I, who was in Su Jihu's arms, laughed, "You just realized." Su Fingyan was pleasantly surprised, "Look, you have dimples again." Jiang and I turned her head and was about to put on a straight face when Su Jihu gently poked her little dimple that could make all the men in the world drunk. She lowered her head and teased, "You cute girl. Sister is willing to let that guy leave Gangnam-do, but I can't bear to let you go." Su Fingyan stretched out his hand and slapped it on the table in front of Jiang and I. After retracting his hand, it was the copper coin that he picked up from the spring water. He shamelessly said, "I'll give it to you. Isn't that heroic?" Jiang and I hesitated for a moment. Probably because of Su Jihu's face, she reached out and took the copper coin and held it in her hand. After the vegetarian meal was served, Su Jihu ate the wonton and said, "Today there's a debate at Bagua Temple. Do you want to listen?" Su Fingyan said indifferently, "Up to you." Su Jihu emphasized, "You can listen, but you're not allowed to fight or kill." Su Fingyan buried his head in a vegetarian bun and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Tang, she will definitely keep an eye on me." After breakfast, Su Jihu took him to see the peonies in Bagua Temple. Jiang and I and Li Chungang walked at the back. The little mud man took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention and opened his palm. He peeked at the sweaty copper coin and then quickly clenched it tightly like a thief. The old god of swords who seemed to be looking left and right sighed in his heart. "Mother, you silly girl. You're going to be eaten alive for the rest of your life. Could it be that a small copper coin is more valuable than this old man's lifetime of swordsmanship? Chapter 244. Most of the peonies in Baogwa Temple had already passed their flowering period, so the two types of peonies, Yao, Huang, Wei, and Zi, no longer competed for beauty. Only a few relatively mediocre peonies were still blooming, such as the Mo Kue peonies that hid flowers in the leaves, which reduced their charm. However, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. The peonies in Baogwa Temple could still be considered splendid compared to Bailiang Palace. Just walking around the temple and admiring the scenery took up 3.5 hours. There was still some time before lunch, so the group of people sipped tea in an elegant meditation room. It was clearly a temple, but the one brewing the tea was a graceful Taoist nun. The emperors of the two dynasties all worshipped Taoism, following the example of their superiors and subordinates. Zhuang Lao Shui also said that tea was an important topic for the scholars of Gangnam-do. Many women of aristocratic families had the habit of devoting themselves to Huang Lao Shui's elegance. However, it was still somewhat strange for a Taoist nun to appear in the meditation room. She was about 30 years old, with red cheeks, long eyebrows, and blue eyebrows. She looked very much like a Taoist cultivator. Su Huipeng could be considered Su Fengnian's close friend. Probably because the two women were both widows, they had gotten closer over the years. Perhaps this Taoist nun loved the house and its crow, so she was quite polite to Su Fengnian. Although she did not speak much while brewing tea, most of her time was spent exchanging pleasantries with Su Weisheng. Occasionally, her gaze would meet His Royal Highness, and she would smile. The teapot was an exquisite tin bottle. It was expensive because it was tightly sealed, and the nature of tin was similar to the nature of tea. Before storing it, the large bottle was filled with water and the small bottle was blown to test for leakage. She looked like an expert in the way of tea. How could a layman like her understand these things? She only thought about how to make the jade more expensive. The teapot was a simple and unadorned style. She saw Su Fengnian staring at the teapot, so she explained, "My father came across this when he was young and went to the two Zen temples to listen to the teachings of the eminent monks. He took the mud from the hands of a monk who had been farming all year round and sank it to the bottom of a vat. He followed the pattern of the gall of a ginkgo tree in the two Zen temples and carved it into it. Later, for some unknown reason, it spread. The name of the pot came from hiding one's fingerprints can welcome spring. However, in Yangzhou's ordinary wintering pots, the mud and sand are all dug from the head of the Yangtze River." Su Jihu was trying hard to insert a peony into Su Fengnian's hair bun, but Su Fengnian would rather die than comply. The brother and sister went back and forth, but Su Jihu, who had not succeeded in the end, panted and laughed, "That old monk is the great abbot of the two Zen temples. I heard that he has lived for 150 or 160 years. In the whole world, only the great master of the Dan Cauldron of Wudang Mountain in Bailiang, Song Jiming, can compare." Every 10 years, Uncle Su would go to the two Zen temples. Other than listening to Zen and scriptures, he would also ask the old monk for the mud for his hands. Therefore, a caddy of mud on the head of the Yangtze River is worth a caddy of gold. In the end, the teapot made by Uncle Su's father has the Buddhist aura. Su Fengnian had just taken a green jade teacup and was about to drink some tea when he heard that the teapot was made from the old monk's hand-washing mud. His expression immediately became unnatural. He could not drink the Buddhist aura, and he really did not want to drink it. However, since he had already boarded a pirate ship, it was difficult to disembark. He could only force himself to take a sip. He could not drink the tea properly, so he did not dare to blindly show off. The tea leaves and the spring water used to make the tea were naturally excellent, but as soon as he thought of the 3 words hand-washing mud, he felt a little discouraged and lost interest. In a moment of carelessness, Su Jihu inserted the peony flower into his hair, but he was too lazy to pull it out. For no reason, he thought of Miss Li Zi who claimed to live in the temple, and the little monk Zunan Nan. For a moment, he was lost in thought, and then he thought of the rumors about the old abbot of the two Zen temples. It was said that this old monk, who was regarded by the world as a holy monk and destined to be called an ancestor after his death, was very interesting. He was very illiterate. When he was young, he only chopped firewood and burned charcoal to support his mother. The family who bought firewood believed in Buddhism and often read the Diamond Sutra. Over time, he understood something. After his mother passed away, as soon as he went up the mountain, he received the mantle of the two Zen Buddhas, shaved his head, accepted the precepts, and became a monk to preach the Dharma in one go. It should be noted that he was preaching the Dharma and not the scriptures. Although this had something to do with his poor background and illiteracy, there was no doubt that this monk's comprehension was close to that of the great Buddha. Listening to the Diamond Sutra, he understood 10,000 things. The monks of the two Zen temples had recited more than 10,000 scriptures. However, when they asked this monk for advice on Buddhist scriptures, the monk would come straight to the point and say that he had never read their scriptures. Therefore, the monk only asked them to recite the scriptures. Often, when they recited a small part or half of the scriptures, the monk would say, "Stop," and then he would explain to them. No one disagreed. There was once a century-old abbot of the Fawa temple, the largest temple in the southern kingdom, who asked a 40-year-old monk why he could not understand the meaning of the Lotus Sutra after reading it 10,000 times. In the end, after the old abbot recited only a few paragraphs, the young monk began to explain the meaning of the scriptures. The old abbot was enlightened and left with gratitude. When the world heard this, it was simply amazing. It was impossible to imagine how a monk who could not even read scriptures could save people. Even the immortal chi of the Dragon Tiger Mountain had to salute him when he saw him. The two most outstanding figures of Buddhism appeared at the same time in a lotus debate 60 years ago, but the result left everyone confused. The two just sat facing each other without saying a word for the whole night. That was the last time the immortal Chi Xuanjin appeared in the world before he ascended. Chapter 245. When this monk was no longer young and grew older, no one had ever heard of him learning to read or read scriptures. Only when the white-clothed monk, who had been away for 15 years, returned did he have his disciple talk about scriptures for 3 days and 3 nights, nodding repeatedly. In the end, he risked universal condemnation and allowed the white-clothed monk to drink wine and marry a wife. Later on, he had an epiphany of betrayal. Su Fengnian was shocked and spilled tea all over the floor. He muttered to himself, "White-clothed monk Li Xiaoxin, Miss Li who has lived in the temple since she was young." Taoist nun Su Huipong had already seen that Su Fengnian was not in the mood to drink tea. Spilling tea like this was even more rude. How was it different from the secular world? She was somewhat unhappy, but did not say anything. She no longer had any thoughts of pouring a second cup of tea for His Royal Highness. It seemed that what the world said about the Beiliang heir having a golden exterior was not an exaggeration. Her sister, Su Shufei, who was originally expected to be the most favored in the harem, was suddenly banished to the cold palace. Everyone in the Su family was furious, but she was a widow and would not vent her anger on Su Jihu like the other members of the family. Last night, when she learned that His Royal Highness was stirring up trouble in the 2 counties, she only laughed it off. She did not even agree when the family told her to use Su Jihu to get close to His Royal Highness to find out the truth. Seeing it with her own eyes today, she was really disappointed. He was nothing more than relying on the king of Beiliang's family to bully others. This was no different from the useless descendants of the 4 great clans in Yangzhou. Su Huipong glanced at Su Jihu, who she used to be able to talk to, and sighed in her heart. The tea was not cold, but the atmosphere was much colder. It was not something that could be changed by adding a few pieces of charcoal. Su Jihu seemed to be close to ink, and was not as quick to understand as before. He only said that he wanted to walk around Baogua Temple with his younger brother, and then left the meditation room. Su Hui sat quietly for a while, waiting for the group of people to leave. Then she slowly got up and walked out of the back door of the courtyard. She went straight up the tea mountain. After walking for half an hour, she finally saw a bamboo building. There was a bamboo chair under the bamboo eaves. An old man with snow-white eyebrows was sitting on it. On his knees was a shikigami with snow-white fur. The old man stroked the shikigami's head and looked at the mountain in the distance. The old man stretched out his hand and Suhui sat upright on a small stool beside the bamboo chair. Before she could speak, the old man smiled kindly and said, "You came so early. You must be very disappointed." Su Huipong said softly, "Old ancestor, you have a clear understanding of worldly affairs." The old man smiled and said, "That's good too. Since His Royal Highness can't be helped, then so be it. Us old fellows will also be relieved." Su Huipong knew that her opinion might affect the future plans of the 4 great clans in Yang province. She said nervously, "Old ancestor, why don't you send someone to test him again? I'm afraid I'm wrong." The old man glanced at her. The Taoist nun, who already had a high status, was so scared that her delicate body trembled slightly. The old man stroked the shikigami's head and smiled. "What are you afraid of? Do you think a little girl like you will bear such a huge burden? That would be looking down on people like Qing Lian, Su Gong, and Lu Daolin. Yang province isn't that shabby." Su Huipong's face was pale and she didn't dare to make a sound. The Minister of Personnel, Qing Lian, was the head of the Yu family in Jiang Exean. Lu Daolin was the head of the Lu family in Lake Pavilion. Dragon General, Su Gong. Although he wasn't the head of the Su family in Gumu, he was still a great general of the dynasty who held military power. However, when these talented big shots of Yang province saw this old ancestor, even if they did not tremble with fear like Su Huipong, they still had to stand and speak respectfully. The reason why Su Huipong could sit down was not only because she was a woman, but also because she was the granddaughter-in-law of this old consecrator of Yang province. How could the foundation and power of the enormous Jiangnan scholars group be compared to the Green Party with only 100 years of foundation? Hong Jia's escape to the north was planned by the old ancestor. There was also the family traits that evaluated the ranking of the clans in the world. A total of 9 people from the dynasty participated. The old ancestor's ranking was even higher than that of the current Grand Secretary, Zhang Jiulu. This was because when the old ancestor was young, he was under the same master as the old Grand Secretary and the Grand Preceptor of West Chu, Sun Shiji. No matter how powerful Zhang Jiulu was, he still had to consider himself a junior. The old man gazed into the distance. Today's debate between kings and tyrants will probably have to pick up the wisdom of others again. Su Huipong hesitated but didn't say anything in the end. The old ancestor was involved in the debate between kings and tyrants at the pinnacle of the past 50 years. Naturally, he had the right to say this. The old man sighed. The old Grand Secretary was lucky to have Zhang Jiulu surpassing him. Otherwise, with his ability, he would only be a paperhanger in the empire. He was destined to be unsuitable after the Spring and Autumn War. It's good that he died. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to maintain his integrity in his later years. That old man's son from West Chu is miserable. In terms of reputation, the two of us added together can't compare to him. Now, among the scholars, he only loses to Su Rintu in terms of infamy. It's better for him to die. Su Huipong only listened with an open mind. The old man heard the lion cat meow and lowered his head to look. He smiled. It's not good for that crown prince to not be able to rise. It's a good thing in the short term. In the long term, wouldn't we have lived in vain after being called old by Tang Shi Sword Immortal for so many years? Su Huipong fell to his knees. The old man muttered, "What happened between you and Liu Baijie in the past is nothing. Get up. The ground is cold and it's not good to get cold. One has to be down to earth, but this isn't the way to do it." Su Huipong stood up shakily and sat down again. The old man narrowed his eyes and said, "Go." Let that humble scholar meet His Royal Highness. With him coming up with plans for Bailiang, he won't lose to Zhao Guangling and Su Rintabak then. This stagnant water will be revived. Su Huipong stood up gently. The old man said calmly, "Go and recommend yourself to that crown prince. Only then can you completely sever your relationship with Lu Baijie." This female Taoist priest who had been pure of heart and few desires for many years didn't refuse. When she left, she bit her lip until it bled. Chapter 246. Su Huipong walked along the Tea Mountain path and finally walked out of the great ancestors' field of vision. She stood among the tea bushes and looked at the yellow glazed roof pavilion at the top of the Baogwa temple, lost in thought. Other than the blood from biting her lip, there was not much grief on her face. She did not hate the great ancestors' arrangement, she only hated the green-robed swordsman for not fighting back then. She cultivated wholeheartedly and had the ability to retain her youthful appearance. She looked like a 30-year-old woman, but she was actually close to 40. When she first met him, she was only 13. How many 13s could there be in life? She wiped away the blood and walked down the mountain with a gloomy face. Su Huipong did not know that the green-robed swordsman had been watching for many years in the depths of the shade. After seeing her enter the Baogwa temple, he slowly walked toward the bamboo building. The old man and cat were still there. The snowball-like Shih Tzu screamed. The dozing old Yangzhou minister of offerings raised his eyelids with some difficulty and looked at the unpolished jade carefully carved by the Lu family. This swordsman used to be so high-spirited. If it were not for the fact that he could not overcome the barrier of love, he would have gone very far whether he was an official or a swordsman. The old man comforted the frightened Shih Tzu on his knees and frowned. He asked calmly, "Did you hear that?" Tangshi sword fairy Lu Baijie nodded. He looked at the old man coldly with one finger on the scabbard. It looked like the ancient sword could be unsheathed at any time. With Lu Baijie's attainments in the sword evaluation, he could unsheath his sword very quickly. He did not need to show it deliberately. Of course, this was Lu Baijie expressing his position. If the old man did not take back his words to Su Huipong, he did not mind doing another disgraceful act as Tangshi's sword fairy and not as a disciple of the Lu family. So what if you are the old master of the Jiangxinyu family? I, Lu Baijie, have a sword in my hand and a clear conscience. Why should I care? Yu Jinkong's eyelids trembled. One of his hands was no longer stroking the snow-white Chaosi. Instead, his 5 fingers formed a claw and gripped the pet's head. However, he didn't use any strength. The Chaosi, which instinctively felt uncomfortable, didn't seem to understand. It turned its head. Yu Jiankong, one of the few people in the dynasty who had hopes of obtaining the posthumous title of Wenzhong after his death, suddenly laughed self-mockingly. As for the posthumous title of Wenzhong, that was even higher than Wenzhong, the dynasty had been empty for 120 years. Even he didn't have any extravagant hopes. The old man only looked again at the distant green mountains. There were many mountains and rivers in Jiangnan, and he never got tired of looking at them. There was actually a rare hint of compromise in his light tone. He said softly, "Tangshi, you know that back then, my original intention was for you to be the head of the Lu family." Lu Daolin was also willing. Lu Baijie rudely interrupted, "I don't want to." Old consecrator Yu Jian frowned and said, "You are unwilling to marry the pearl of the Yu family, unwilling to become the head of the Lu family, unwilling to be recommended to become an official, unwilling to be a general. As a child of the Lu family, Tangshi, do you know that there are too many things you are unwilling to do that are against the rules? If you didn't slack off like this, how could the Lu family even surpass the Bo family and the Yuan family and suppress you all?" Lu Baijie was silent. Her finger no longer touched the scabbard. The old consecrator sighed and extended his hand, indicating for this junior that he had once thought highly of to sit on the stool. After Lu Baijie sat down, Yu Jiankong, who had specially rushed over from Jiangxin County to Baogwa Temple today, smiled. It's a pity that she's not a descendant of the Yu family. The juniors of my family are more than steady, but lacking in drive. They can only preserve what they have, and it's very difficult for them to revive. How would they dare to call us old fellows old farts? Even if they have resentment, they don't even dare to curse in their stomachs. At such a young age, they all have an unbearable stench of lethargy. Tangshi, do you know why I'm making things difficult for a girl like Su Huipong? Sword Immortal Tangshi shook her head. The old consecrator picked up the Persian cat with both hands and sighed. How is she worthy of you? Lu Baijia smiled bitterly. But I just can't let go of her. The old man snorted coldly. Your father had a son in his later years, and he especially doted on you. Before he died, he even left a letter for me in Su Yinxing. Ignoring the rules of the sect, he didn't hesitate to hand over some of his family's assets and take the risk of inviting a wolf into the house, begging us to help you become the head of the Lu family. Do you really think Lu Daolin doesn't know this secret? I could have kept it a secret, but Su Yinxing had already revealed it to him. These past few years, Gumu has used the Lu family's influence to secretly grow stronger. The wolf has already entered the house, but you have greatly disappointed your father. It's true that Lu Daolin is a good person, but how can he take advantage of a group of treacherous people like Gumu's Su family? Let's not talk about the distant matters. Empress Xiao watched coldly from the sidelines and remembered all of this in her heart. Do you really think that Empress Xiao would be as close as sisters with that girl from the Su family? This time, the crown prince of Bailiang stirred up trouble and angered the Gangnam-do scholars. The 30,000 students of the Imperial College in the capital were incited. How can your brother be safe in the Imperial College? If nothing unexpected happens, Lu Daolin, who can't do anything inside or outside, will take the blame and resign as the right chancellor. Huan Shu, who has been fighting with your brother for many years, will naturally be happy to take advantage of the situation. The Lu family's setback in the capital, in the end, isn't it Yang Zhou's loss? If not, why would I, an old man with one foot in the coffin, come here? To listen to the boring difference between a king and a tyrant. Or to be threatened by you with a sword. Sword Fairy Tangshi said calmly, Uncle, aren't you afraid of playing the lute to a cow by telling me this? It wasn't clear whether he was angry at her misfortune or lamenting her incompetence, but the old consecrator was vaguely angry. He raised his voice and said, Tangshi, I can prevent Su Hui from doing that thing, but this time, you have to come out and share the burden of the Lu family. Otherwise, with my temper, letting an insignificant Su Hui go and embarrass the Gumu Su family all these years is just a reminder to them. Tangshi, I'll ask you one last time. Are you willing to go to the capital to be the assistant minister of the Ministry of War? No matter how you become a fourth-rank official in the capital, I'm only asking if you are willing or not. Lu Baijia said bitterly, I only ask that you don't make things difficult for her. The old consecrator smiled slightly and returned to his usual carefree state. He said with a pleasant expression, Tangshi, Tangshi, those who are closely involved can't see clearly. If you are willing to be an official, who would dare to make things difficult for her? Lu Baijia shook her head and said, even the daughter of the king of Bailiang is bullied like this. She is only an abandoned child of the Gumu Su family. How can I be at ease? The old man said calmly, all right, I can make an agreement with you. You go to the capital. After all, she is the granddaughter-in-law of the Yu family in name. No one can bully her. Sword Fairy Tangshi, Lu Baijia stood up and left calmly with her hands clasped in front. The old man narrowed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. His thoughts were unfathomable.